Lin Xun was an 18-year-old youth who lay collapsed upon a 30-meter mountain of corroded slag and fractured iron. The surrounding atmospheric vapor was dense with sulfurous acid and corrosive alchemical sediment, discarded continuously across several millennia by the smelting pavilions of the Nine Dragons Sect. As cognitive awareness slowly fought its way through the blinding agony radiating from his lower abdomen, his gaze fixed upon the jagged basalt cliffs that ascended into an endless shroud of black smog. His pulse was weak, registering an irregular bradycardia caused by the catastrophic rupture of his lower dantian, a fatal trauma inflicted by the blazing palm strike of law enforcement elder Xue Wu 3 weeks prior. The devastation of Lin Xun's spiritual foundation had not been the consequence of an unforeseen cultivation accident, but rather a cold, premeditated maneuver designed to strip him of his ancestral heritage. During the annual outer court examination, Elder Xue Wu had forcefully driven a spike of destructive crimson qi directly into Lin Xun's spiritual core to seize an ancient jade lineage pendant left behind by his deceased parents. To prevent any formal investigation, false allegations regarding the theft of longevity pills were fabricated against Lin Xun, thereby legitimizing his permanent banishment to the Abyssal Trash Valley, where discarded artifacts, decaying beast carcasses, and crippled disciples were abandoned to perish. Lying amidst the jagged edges of rusted polearms, Lin Xun felt a sharp vibration originating from a rhomboid black meteorite fragment embedded beneath his right collarbone. The dull throbbing within his chest transformed into an intense thermal current that coursed along his major spinal neural pathways, resembling molten copper injected directly into his vascular system. His internal body temperature escalated far beyond standard physiological limits, triggering a rapid cellular cascade that halted the advancing necrosis caused by the inhalation of toxic alchemical miasma. Directly before his expanding pupils, intricate geometric arrays of golden light crystallized in midair, organizing themselves into a stable, high-definition holographic interface. Glowing runic inscriptions spelled out precise diagnostic parameters that categorized his biological and spiritual condition with surgical accuracy. The analytical display indicated that his systemic vitality had fallen to a critical threshold of 8%, immediately followed by the confirmation of absolute soul synchronization with an ancient artifact known as the Universal Decomposition and Upcycling Core. This awakening did not merely rescue Lin Xun from the precipice of clinical demise, it fundamentally altered how his visual and neurological senses perceived the material universe. Every jagged shard of broken weapon steel, shattered porcelain pill flask, and calcified monster bones scattered across the trench began emitting a translucent wireframe overlay. Accompanying these overlays were detailed numerical percentages regarding elemental purity, lattice degradation, and the potential yield of refined essences extractable from the scrap. Gazing upon his right forearm, which was now inscribed with faint, glowing alchemical runes, Lin Xun released a slow, measured breath that carried no trace of panic. The searing resentment born from institutional betrayal and the arrogance of corrupt elders did not cloud his mind with irrational fury, but rather crystallized into a calm, systematic strategy for total retribution. The toxic rift that the entire cultivation world regarded as a foul graveyard had, in an instant, transformed into an inexhaustible storehouse of primal matter waiting to be forged into supreme power. He shifted his position slowly, testing the mechanical integrity of his musculoskeletal structure, while monitoring the real-time biometric readouts floating across his vision. The residual toxins within his superficial tissues were rapidly broken down into benign vapor and expelled through his pores, leaving his skin pale, yet remarkably resilient against the corrosive air. With his sensory perception operating at an unprecedented level of clarity, Lin Xun prepared to initiate his first controlled deconstruction of the surrounding wasteland. As he walked, his boots crunched against brittle layers of calcified beast skulls that had accumulated over centuries of continuous dumping. Each skeletal remnant was highlighted by a faint amber grid, cataloging traces of dormant marrow essence, phosphorus compounds, and residual beast core fragments that ordinary cultivators could neither detect nor utilize. The realization that millions of tons of discarded spiritual energy lay dormant in this subterranean landfill filled his mind with an exhilarating sense of tactical clarity. He noted that the ambient air pressure increased significantly as he moved deeper toward the western basalt wall, creating a natural microclimate that concentrated the heavier acidic vapors near the ground. By adjusting his respiration pattern to synchronize with the golden alchemical pulse in his chest, Lin Xun created a localized bioenergetic shield across his pulmonary passages, filtering out 85% of the airborne lead and mercury particulates before they could reach his alveolar sacs. Reaching the base of the western limestone cliff, he discovered that the entrance to the crevice was partially obstructed by a massive, collapsed iron date that had once belonged to an ancient sect treasury before being discarded centuries ago. The gate was covered in thick layers of reddish-brown rust and corroded defensive formations that pulsed with faint, erratic sparks of unstable lightning chi. Rather than attempting to climb over the sharp, corroded spikes or bypass the obstruction through treacherous, unstable scree, Lin Xun extended his right palm towards the central iron hinge. The golden runes on his forearm flared with focused intensity, initiating an instantaneous molecular diagnostic that revealed the gate's exact metallurgical composition: 68% low-grade star iron, 22% common carbon steel, and 10% oxidized zinc alloy. With a subtle flex of his wrist, he activated the primary decomposition protocol, sending a wave of golden light rippling through the rusted metal lattice. Within 3 seconds, the massive iron hinge dissolved into a shower of harmless metallic dust and vaporized rust, causing the heavy gate to swing open silently on its remaining axis, without generating a single acoustic echo that could alert the disciplinary patrols on the cliffs above. Stepping across the threshold into the sheltered interior of the cavern, Lin Xun felt the ambient temperature stabilize to a manageable 22 degrees Celsius. The limestone walls were dry and free of acidic moisture, providing an ideal staging ground for his initial alchemical operations. Turning his gaze back toward the toxic wasteland outside, he prepared to lay the foundation of an empire forged from the discarded debris of heaven. Examining his respiratory mechanics, the analytical interface revealed that 24% of his bronchioles were experiencing localized chemical constriction from inhaling sulfur dioxide fumes. To counteract this acute inflammatory response, the golden alchemical core released micropulses of biocompatible resonance that dilated his airway passages and stimulated the mucosal cilia to flush out heavy metal deposits. The ambient topography of the Abyssal Trash Valley spanned an estimated 14,000 square kilometers of fractured tectonic rifts, bordered by perpendicular basalt palisades that reached 5,000 meters into the cloud canopy. This geological containment formed a natural atmospheric pressure trap, where dense, heavy gases, such as mercury vapor and alchemical lead fumes, settled into persistent stagnation. Lin Xun's cognitive processing speed reached an astonishing benchmark of 200 operations per second, allowing him to perceive the trajectory of falling scrap metal in slow motion. When a 500-pound jagged segment of a bronze cauldron dislodged from the upper cliff edge 300 meters above, his visual HUD calculated its terminal impact zone within 14 milliseconds, enabling him to step aside with minimal caloric expenditure. The subterranean water table beneath the basalt floor was heavily saturated with alchemical leachate, possessing a pH of 2.4. However, the diagnostic scan identified that beneath this corrosive surface runoff lay an ancient geothermal aquifer of pure mineral water, sealed behind 30 meters of impermeable granite strata, a vital resource that would later form the lifeblood of his self-sustaining sanctuary. Analyzing the historical deposition rate of the scrap heaps, the diagnostic system calculated that the Nine Dragons Sect had dumped over 12,000 tons of metallurgical refuse into this sector annually for the past 800 years. This continuous accumulation created a subterranean geological strata composed of alternating layers of compressed star iron, oxidized copper, and petrified spirit bone. The toxic miasma that blanketed the valley was not uniform in its chemical density, but rather formed convection currents driven by geothermal heat vents located 3 kilometers to the south. Lin Xun mapped these thermal updrafts in real time, noting that during the afternoon peak, the concentration of airborne lead sulfide dropped by 40% in the higher limestone crevices. His cognitive diagnostic module monitored the continuous regeneration of his damaged neural tissues as the golden alchemical core repaired the micro-lesions caused by oxygen deprivation. Within 90 minutes of the initial awakening, his synaptic transmission speeds had normalized, accompanied by a 20% expansion in working memory capacity and spatial reasoning faculties. The thermodynamic distribution of energy across the valley followed a non-linear decay curve, characterized by intermittent surges of volatile yang fire qi escaping from the deeper volcanic rifts. Lin Xun monitored these thermal surges through his sensory HUD, calculating the exact time intervals required for his localized cooling wards to dissipate the excess heat without overloading his bodily meridians. His metabolic adaptation to the high-sulfur atmosphere stimulated the synthesis of specialized antioxidant metallothionein proteins within his renal and hepatic cells. These biological compounds bound directly to circulating cadmium and lead ions, neutralizing their cytotoxic potential and safely precipitating them as inert organic complexes. The acoustic resonance of the wind whistling through the jagged basalt spires created an ambient background noise of 52 decibels, with peak acoustic spikes occurring during sudden barometric pressure shifts. By filtering out these predictable environmental frequencies, Lin Xun's auditory interface isolated anomalous sound signatures, such as the distant scraping of scavenger iron tools or the subtle wing beats of nocturnal carrion beasts. The geomechanical pressure gradients within the valley floor varied dynamically with the subterranean magma tide cycles, creating cyclical microfractures in the basalt substrate. Lin Xun mapped these seismic vectors through his vibrational sensors, utilizing the natural tectonic shifts to identify concealed cavern pockets that had remained untouched by surface contaminants for over 10,000 years. His cellular adaptation protocol established an automated biofeedback loop that regulated his basal metabolic rate in response to shifting environmental oxygen levels. When atmospheric oxygen dropped below 12% during dense fog incursions, his cellular mitochondria transitioned seamlessly into anaerobic glycolysis without accumulating toxic lactate byproducts. The kinetic energy dissipation of dislodged rockfalls followed predictable Newtonian trajectories along the 80-degree cliff inclines. By pre-calculating the bounce vectors of falling boulders, Lin Xun moved through hazardous scree zones with mathematical certainty, eliminating the need to divert precious qi into protective defensive shields. The chemical equilibrium of the surface runoff was influenced by the oxidation of discarded celestial copper cauldrons, releasing cupric ions that formed insoluble complexes with the ambient silicate clays. Lin Xun cataloged these mineral reactions, recognizing that the resulting blue-tinted clay layers possessed superior electrical insulating properties that could be utilized to line the high-voltage conduits of his subterranean power grid. His neurological monitoring interface established a continuous diagnostic baseline for his cognitive focus, measuring an attention stability rating of 99.4% during prolonged data processing sessions. This mental discipline eliminated cognitive fatigue, allowing him to maintain uninterrupted tactical awareness across multi-day operations without requiring restorative sleep cycles. Inside the sheltered limestone interior, Lin Xun methodically set about gathering the raw precursors needed to execute his first comprehensive alchemical synthesis. Scouring the immediate vicinity of the cave entrance, he retrieved 11 fractured spiritual daggers forged from depleted star iron, 3 shattered ceramic flasks coated in dried, oxidized pill residue, and several clusters of petrified lunar moss growing along the mineral fissures. In the conventional understanding of the martial world, these items represented hazardous waste, capable of causing irreversible cellular toxicity upon prolonged handling. Arranging the collection of scrap upon a flat slate boulder at the center of the chamber, Lin Xun observed the golden alchemical runes on his right forearm ignite with an audible hum. The System HUD immediately generated a 3-dimensional holographic matrix above the workspace, isolating each object into its constituent molecular elements. The diagnostic data confirmed the presence of 40 grams of lethal lead oxide, 120 grams of depleted star iron ore, and 8 grams of dormant snow jade herb essence encapsulated within the petrified pill residue. Focusing his mental intent upon the central core in his chest, Lin Xun initiated the Universal Decomposition sequence. A brilliant cascade of amber light erupted from his fingertips, washing over the pile of scrap and breaking down its atomic bonds with microscopic precision. The decomposition process selectively targeted and vaporized all toxic compounds, expelling them through the cave's natural ventilation chimneys as harmless gray steam, while preserving only the purest, uncorrupted energetic building blocks. Within heartbeats, the suspended particulate cloud began to condense under the influence of the upcycling protocol, drawing the purified herbal essences together in a swirling vortex of golden light. The floating particles crystallized into 2 immaculate, milk-white spherical pills that settled gently upon Lin Xun's open palm, radiating a clean, celestial herbal fragrance that filled the entire cavern with soothing spiritual resonance. The analytical interface updated the object designation to Flawless Meridian Cleansing Pills, noting an absolute chemical and spiritual purity rating of 100%. Such an alchemical grade was considered a mythological impossibility among the 5-star Grand Masters of the Nine Dragons Sect, whose most refined medicinal concoctions consistently contained at least 10 to 15% toxic sedimentary dregs that gradually accumulated in a cultivator's internal organs over time. Without a moment's hesitation, Lin Xun ingested one of the pristine pills, allowing the tablet to dissolve smoothly upon contact with his oral mucosa. A gentle, cooling thermal current, resembling glacial spring water, cascaded down his esophagus and spread through his vascular system, surging directly toward the shattered void of his lower dantian. Because the medicine was entirely free of toxic impurities, his cellular tissues absorbed its restorative power with complete thermodynamic efficiency. The agonizing paralysis and phantom nerve pain that had plagued his lower abdomen vanished as the concentrated herbal essence began knitting severed meridian pathways back together. Microscopic golden threads of refined qi anchored themselves across the damaged tissue, reconstructing the spiritual conduits with an anatomical symmetry and resilience far superior to his original natural state. Within 50 minutes of focused meditation, Lin Xun's lower dantian was fully restored and enveloped in a protective golden membrane. The restoration of his energetic foundation triggered an immediate physiological breakthrough, elevating his cultivation from a crippled invalid directly into the 3rd layer of the body-tempering realm. His 12 primary meridians, now widened and reinforced by the golden alchemical matrix, circulated spiritual energy with effortless fluidity, filling his musculoskeletal structure with dense, vibrant power. He then turned his attention to the remaining metallic residue on the stone table, which had crystallized into an ingot of hyperdense, purified star iron. The divine decomposition had eliminated every microscopic air pocket, slag inclusion, and carbon impurity, leaving a block of metal with a tensile strength exceeding 5 times that of standard military-grade spiritual steel. This single ingot represented the raw material needed to forge precision alchemical tools and defensive implements. Examining the crystalline star iron through his diagnostic HUD, Lin Xun realized that the implications of his divine core extended far beyond personal healing. By reversing centuries of material degradation in seconds, he had effectively dismantled the fundamental resource scarcity that governed the entire cultivation hierarchy. Every broken sword and discarded scrap heap in the valley was now a potential source of supreme-grade weapons and sovereign elixirs. He cataloged the precise energy consumption, synthesis duration, and molecular yield of the process within his internal memory banks, establishing a standardized operational procedure for future mass refinements. His mental state remained completely detached and analytical, treating each stage of his ascension as an engineering equation to be solved through optimized resource management. As the rhythmic pulse of his newly awakened dantian resonated throughout his chest, Lin Xun stood up and tested his physical flexibility. Moving through a series of basic martial forms, he noted that his strike velocity had increased by 40%, while his energy consumption had decreased by nearly half. The foundation was now securely laid, and the time had come to expand his operations across the wider expanse of the Forgotten Valley. Analyzing the thermodynamic efficiency of the decomposition cycle, the System HUD indicated that 0% thermal loss had occurred during the subatomic transition. The Quantum-Alchemical furnace operated on a closed-loop conservation principle, where the binding energy of the broken molecular bonds was directly recycled to stabilize the newly synthesized crystal matrix. The two flawless meridian cleansing pills exhibited a surface tension and crystalline density 40% higher than conventional medicinal tablets. Under high-resolution spiritual magnification, their interior structure was composed of perfectly aligned hexagonal microclusters of active herbal alkaloids, completely devoid of the chaotic amorphous slag that typically caused meridian blockage in human cultivators. Upon ingestion, the bioavailability of the active ingredients reached a theoretical maximum of 99.9% within 40 seconds. As the restorative essence permeated his hepatic portal system, it activated specialized cytochrome enzymes that accelerated the hepatic clearance of lingering environmental toxins by over 800%. The purified star iron ingot left upon the slate table possessed an ultimate tensile strength of 1,200 megapascals and a Rockwell hardness rating of 68. Lin Xun calculated that by layering this refined alloy with carbonized spirit bone composite, he could manufacture armor plates capable of dissipating both physical kinetic impacts and pure elemental chi strikes simultaneously. The microscopic examination of the star iron crystalline structure revealed that standard smelting methods in the upper sect introduced severe oxygen contamination during the molten phase. This oxidation created microscopic shear planes along the grain boundaries that caused 30% of all forged weapons to fracture prematurely under high-impact combat loads. By contrast, the Universal Decomposition Core operated in a vacuum-isolated quantum envelope where zero oxygen molecules were permitted to interact with the molten metal particles. This absolute purification resulted in a homogeneous isotropic crystalline lattice with uniform tensile strength in all three spatial dimensions. Lin Xun's lower dantian exhibited a 20-fold increase in internal surface area following the installation of the golden runic membrane. This micro-folded cellular topology allowed his spiritual vessel to store double the volume of liquid qi compared to standard cultivators of equivalent physical stature, laying an unshakable physiological foundation for his future ascension. The structural analysis of the flawless meridian cleansing pills revealed a spherical diameter of exactly 10.0 millimeters, with a mass variance of less than 0.01% across identical production batches. This extreme uniformity eliminated the dosage unpredictability that frequently plagued manual pill rolling techniques in conventional sect alchemy pavilions. When the purified herbal essence diffused across Lin Xun's gastric mucosa, it triggered an immediate upregulation of cellular transport proteins, facilitating 98% gastrointestinal absorption within 30 seconds. The lack of inert excipients or binding starches prevented digestive enzyme degradation, ensuring that the entire pharmacological payload reached systemic circulation intact. The reconstructed star iron ingot demonstrated an electrical resistivity of 1.6 microohm centimeters at 20 degrees Celsius, approaching the theoretical conductivity limits of ideal metallic conductors. Lin Xun cataloged these electrical properties for future application in the manufacture of high-gain array antennas and electromagnetic formation triggers. The atomic recombination dynamics of the star iron synthesis demonstrated a 99.9% reduction in lattice point defects compared to standard metallurgical forgings. This microscopic perfection eliminated the internal stress risers that typically caused metal fatigue under repetitive high-frequency harmonic vibrations. The flawless meridian cleansing pills exhibited an enthalpy of solution of minus 12.4 kilojoules per mole, indicating a spontaneous, energetically favorable dissolution upon contact with biological fluids. This thermodynamic profile facilitated rapid mucosal absorption without depleting the host organism's localized metabolic energy reserves. Lin Xun's lower dantian established a self-reinforcing electromagnetic torus field that rotated at 42 radians per second. This energetic vortex acted as a magnetic confinement barrier, preventing the leakage of concentrated spiritual particles into surrounding somatic tissues, and maintaining an internal pressure of 2.6 atmospheres. The Quantum-Alchemical core's subatomic magnetic confinement field operated at an intensity of 12 teslas, ensuring that volatile elemental isotopes remained in a stabilized plasma state during the upcycling cycle. This precise containment prevented high-energy gamma photon emission, ensuring that the entire synthesis took place with zero ionizing radiation leakage into the surrounding cavern. The physical surface of the flawless meridian cleansing pills exhibited a hydrophobic lotus effect that repelled atmospheric moisture, preventing ambient humidity from degrading the active herbal compounds during storage. This surface property ensured that the pills maintained a consistent shelf life across extreme environmental conditions. Over the subsequent 14 days, Lin Xun executed 87 individual deconstruction and synthesis cycles, systematically transforming the hazardous waste of the western perimeter into high-grade cultivation resources. His daily routine followed a rigorous mathematical schedule: 4 hours of scrap scavenging along the cliff bases, 6 hours of molecular deconstruction and elixir synthesis, and 6 hours of deep meditative absorption to fortify his physical and spiritual vessels. His continuous consumption of flawless meridian cleansing pills induced a profound metabolic metamorphosis throughout his biological systems. Residual cellular toxins and metabolic waste products were systematically purged through his dermal pores as a fine, odorless gray dust, leaving his skin smooth, taut, and resilient against environmental acids. His bone density increased by 300%, adopting a reinforced crystalline microlattice that granted him immense structural resistance against blunt force trauma. The analytical HUD tracked the rapid expansion of his cardiovascular and nervous systems in real time, mapping every microcapillary branching off his spinal cord. Unlike conventional cultivators who suffered excruciating meridian tearing when attempting to force raw spiritual energy through narrow channels, Lin Xun's flawlessly refined qi flowed with absolute hydrodynamic smoothness, eliminating all friction and energetic turbulence within his body. To calibrate his physical combat parameters, Lin Xun conducted kinetic impact tests against the solid basalt formations deep within the cavern. Delivering an unassisted straight punch against a 3-ton boulder, his HUD calculated an instantaneous kinetic energy output exceeding 35,000 joules. The impact generated a sharp acoustic shockwave that pulverized the rock into gravel, yet his knuckles sustained zero contusions or microscopic fissures, protected by the dense layer of golden alchemical chi coursing beneath his skin. This explosive physical enhancement propelled his cultivation through the 4th, 5th, and 6th layers of body tempering in rapid succession. His resting metabolic rate dropped to an exceptionally efficient 28 beats per minute, while his lung capacity expanded by 80%, allowing him to operate in oxygen-deprived environments for extended periods without experiencing cognitive impairment or muscular fatigue. Utilizing the purified star iron and dense mineral extracts produced during his refining sessions, Lin Xun crafted a set of weighted training wrist guards and leg braces. Unlike crude iron weights that cause joint strain and uneven tendon wear, these custom-engineered implements were calibrated down to the milligram and inscribed with microgravity runes that distributed gravitational resistance evenly across his entire musculoskeletal framework. As his sensory radius expanded to over 500 meters, Lin Xun began mapping the complex biological ecosystem operating within the deeper sectors of the Abyssal Trash Valley. The toxic environment had given rise to unique mutated beasts that nourished themselves upon the chemical runoff and heavy metal deposits dumped by the upper sect. Among these creatures were iron carapace scorpions, acid-spitting salamander stalker vipers.
Rather than avoiding these dangerous predators, Lin Xun analyzed them as walking repositories of concentrated biochemical reagents and high-density energy cores. Their venom glands contained complex neurotoxic alkaloids that, when processed through the Universal Decomposition Core, could be separated into lethal defensive coatings and potent neural stimulants capable of accelerating cognitive processing during combat.
During his 19th day in the valley, Lin Xun tracked and neutralized an alpha iron carapace scorpion that had established its lair near a collapsed pill pavilion dump. Utilizing a single throwing spike forged from purified star iron, he targeted the creature's unarmored neural cluster with mathematical precision, incapacitating the beast instantly without damaging its internal organs or venom reservoirs. Deconstructing the scorpion's carcass on the spot, Lin Xun extracted 25 grams of pure chitinous armor alloy, 300 milliliters of concentrated neurotoxin, and a pristine third-rank earth beast core. The entire harvesting process took less than 4 minutes, yielding materials that would have required a team of professional hunters several days to extract using conventional dissection methods. He utilized the extracted chitinous alloy to reinforce his linen robes, creating a lightweight, flexible inner tunic that was completely impervious to common blade strikes and corrosive acid sprays. The synthesis of defensive gear and medical reserves proceeded in perfect harmony with his internal training, transforming him into an exceptionally versatile survivalist, capable of thriving in the most lethal environments. Standing upon a high limestone outcropping overlooking the central rift, Lin Xun reviewed his biometric status. His physical refinement was now approaching the absolute limit of the mortal realm, and his dantian was primed to initiate the condensation of liquid spiritual energy. The preliminary phase of his survival was complete. The time had arrived to establish an impregnable subterranean stronghold. During the 3rd week of continuous physical conditioning, the diagnostic interface registered a profound structural realignment of Lin Xun's skeletal architecture. His cortical bone thickness had increased by 4.2 millimeters, with calcium phosphate crystals reorganizing into an interlocking woven lattice that dissipated shockwaves across adjacent bone groups without localizing stress fractures. His cardiovascular output reached elite physiological parameters, with a resting stroke volume of 140 milliliters per beat and a maximal oxygen uptake exceeding 90 milliliters per kilogram per minute. This extraordinary aerobic capacity allowed him to sustain high-intensity anaerobic combat maneuvers for over 45 continuous minutes without accumulating metabolic lactic acid.
The 12 primary meridian channels, traditionally vulnerable to energetic blowback when channeling high-density qi, were now reinforced by a permanent lining of golden runic collagen. This biological shielding enabled Lin Xun to channel burst currents of spiritual energy at flow rates 300% higher than standard cultivators of equivalent cultivation realms.
Mapping the neural conductivity of his peripheral nervous system, the HUD confirmed an axon conduction velocity of 120 meters per second. This near-instantaneous reflex arc allowed Lin Xun to execute complex evasive maneuvers before an opponent's visual cortex could register the initiation of his movement. The biomechanical refinement of Lin Xun's muscular system progressed through targeted myofibrillar hypertrophy without accumulating non-contractile fibrous scar tissue. His skeletal muscle fibers exhibited an optimized ratio of 70% fast-twitch glycolytic fibers and 30% slow-twitch oxidative fibers, providing an ideal balance between explosive kinetic burst power and long-term aerobic endurance. His peripheral circulatory system developed collateral capillary networks around his major joints, ensuring that oxygen and nutrient delivery to his articular cartilage remained uninterrupted even under extreme mechanical compression during combat. This structural adaptation eliminated the chronic joint degradation commonly experienced by martial artists practicing hard external conditioning techniques. The acoustic monitoring of the surrounding territory recorded 60 distinct beast vocalizations over a 24-hour observation cycle. By categorizing these acoustic signatures based on frequency, duration, and amplitude, Lin Xun established an automated early warning perimeter that could predict the approach of hostile mutated beasts up to 15 minutes prior to physical contact. The biomechanical evaluation of Lin Xun's connective tissues indicated a 60% increase in the cross-sectional area of his patellar and Achilles tendons. This structural thickening was accompanied by a higher concentration of type 1 collagen fibers, granting his lower extremities immense elastic energy storage capacity during explosive leaping and sprinting maneuvers. His pulmonary gas exchange efficiency reached an unprecedented 88% saturation at a tidal volume of 800 milliliters per breath. This optimized respiratory mechanic allowed him to sustain maximum aerobic output during prolonged underground excavations without experiencing hypercapnia or oxygen debt. The sensory integration of his right forearm runes established a direct neural link between his somatic nervous system and the quantum decomposition furnace. By modulating his intention, Lin Xun could adjust the radius, depth, and elemental selectivity of the decomposition field within 4 milliseconds, allowing for seamless transitions between macro-scale scrap clearing and micro-scale precision dissection. The osteogenic remodeling of Lin Xun's skeletal framework incorporated specialized hydroxyapatite titanium composite microcrystals along the lines of mechanical stress. This biological reinforcement increased his compressive bone strength to 800 megapascals, allowing him to withstand vertical drop impacts from heights exceeding 40 meters without sustaining structural injury. His neuromuscular response calibration achieved a latency of less than 12 milliseconds between visual stimulus detection and motor unit activation. This near-instantaneous reflex speed allowed him to deflect high-velocity projectile attacks using minimal angular movements of his reinforced wrist guards. The bioenergetic sensor network across his dermal layer mapped the exact electromagnetic field configurations of incoming mutated beasts, allowing him to distinguish between different predator species based on their unique bioelectric signatures at distances exceeding 300 meters. The biomechanical analysis of Lin Xun's upper extremities demonstrated that his radial and ulnar bones had developed an internal honeycomb architecture, reducing bone weight by 15% while increasing torsional load resistance by 45%. This anatomical optimization allowed him to wield heavy polearms with exceptional agility. His endocrine regulation system achieved an automated hormonal balance that suppressed excess cortisol production during high-stress combat encounters, while upregulating epinephrine release, optimizing his cardiovascular and cognitive performance in real time. With his physical cultivation reaching the 9th layer of body tempering, Lin Xun initiated the systematic architectural expansion of his living quarters. Utilizing high-frequency acoustic pulses generated by vibrating his refined star iron blades against the cave walls, he mapped the geological fault lines within the limestone plateau. The acoustic data, processed instantly by his System HUD, revealed an extensive network of hollow volcanic lava tubes extending deep beneath the valley floor, completely isolated from external toxic runoff. Over 48 hours of continuous labor, Lin Xun excavated 3 interconnected subterranean chambers, an alchemical synthesis laboratory, a heavy forging workshop, and a primary meditation sanctum. He fortified the load-bearing stone pillars with composite structural beams forged from recycled titanium slag and carbonized spirit bone, achieving a structural integrity capable of withstanding high-tier explosive spells without the slightest risk of cave-in. To solve the critical issue of air quality, he engineered a closed-loop pneumatic filtration system embedded directly into the cavern walls. The apparatus utilized several hundred hollow, perforated tubes packed with porous volcanic charcoal and magnetically charged iron shavings. When the acidic surface winds entered the intake shafts, the multi-stage filter neutralized the sulfurous compounds and captured airborne heavy metal particulates, venting crisp, oxygen-rich air into the living quarters below. Lin Xun further enhanced the security of his sanctuary by designing an interlocking optical refraction and defensive ward across the cavern's concealed entrance. Scraping residual spirit runes from several dozen shattered sect warding flags, he extracted 40 grams of pure cinnabar and spirit ink. He then inscribed a complex optical refraction array onto the outer rock face, rendering the cavern entrance indistinguishable from the surrounding jagged basalt cliffs, to both visual observation and spiritual soul scans. Inside the workshop chamber, he constructed a heavy hydraulic pressing apparatus, powered by counterweights and geothermal steam vents tapped from a nearby volcanic fissure. This machine allowed him to compress deconstructed metallic dust into hyperdense billets under thousands of pounds of mechanical pressure. The resulting materials possessed a tensile strength that far exceeded standard spiritual iron, providing him with the raw building blocks required to forge advanced weapons and defensive suits. He also established a systematic categorization warehouse within the third chamber, organizing hundreds of salvaged items into clearly marked storage bins. Fractured pill cauldrons, severed beast horns, degraded spirit talismans, and depleted jade slips were cataloged based on their elemental affinities and recycling priority. This organized inventory system allowed him to locate specific molecular precursors instantly whenever a new synthesis blueprint was generated by his analytical interface. The psychological transformation accompanying this physical construction was equally profound. In the span of a single month, Lin Xun had shifted his reality from that of a helpless victim condemned to an agonizing demise to that of an absolute sovereign commanding an impregnable subterranean citadel. The feeling of vulnerability that had accompanied his unjust expulsion was completely eradicated, replaced by an unshakable confidence grounded in verifiable mathematical data and structural invulnerability. As the rhythmic hum of the pneumatic air filters and geothermal generators filled the spacious corridors of his underground base, Lin Xun reviewed the topographical map of the Northern Territory displayed upon his HUD. The time had come to investigate the anomalous cryogenic energy fluctuations that had been registering on his thermal sensors near the infamous Cold Bone Chasm. The engineering specifications of the subterranean citadel adhered to strict architectural principles of structural load distribution. By utilizing parabolic arch geometry throughout the excavated lava tubes, Lin Xun ensured that the thousands of tons of basalt overhead distributed their downward compressive force evenly across the reinforced granite bedrock, eliminating the need for bulky interior support pillars. The multi-stage pneumatic air filtration system incorporated an electrostatic precipitation matrix charged by the natural thermoelectrical differential between the geothermal vents and the cool valley air. This design achieved a 99.9% particulate capture rate, down to 0.1 microns, completely eradicating airborne spores, acidic vapors, and alchemical dust from the subterranean living quarters. The optical refraction ward deployed across the cave entrance utilized 24 synchronized micromirrors cut from polished star iron. These mirrors bent visible light wavelengths around the cavern opening using precision diffraction angles, creating a seamless visual continuation of the adjacent basalt cliff that remained undetectable even under direct midday sunlight. The structural engineering of the subterranean laboratory incorporated hydraulic shock absorbers constructed from coiled star iron springs and pressurized mineral oil reservoirs. These damping mechanisms insulated the delicate alchemical synthesis apparatus from the minor seismic tremors naturally occurring along the volcanic fault line. The air purification array was calibrated to maintain an indoor relative humidity of 45% and a constant temperature of 21 degrees Celsius throughout all seasonal variations. This climate-controlled environment prevented the oxidation of sensitive herbal reagents and ensured optimal storage stability for the synthesized medicinal tablets. The electrical grounding of the workshop was routed through 4 deep copper rods driven 12 meters into the water-saturated granite bedrock beneath the cavern floor. This comprehensive grounding system safely dissipated the static electrical charges generated during high-energy decomposition cycles, eliminating the risk of accidental electrical arcs, igniting the airborne hydrogen gas produced during acid filtration. The geological stability of the subterranean living quarters was verified through a continuous acoustic interferometry grid that monitored seismic microfractures in the surrounding basalt bedrock. The sensor data confirmed that the parabolic load distribution maintained rock stress levels 30% below the critical compressive fracture threshold. The ventilation intake shafts were fitted with automated mechanical dampers that closed instantaneously upon detecting sudden spikes in external atmospheric toxicity, such as those caused by accidental alchemical furnace explosions dumped from the upper cliffs. The secondary internal air reserves were calibrated to support 2 individuals for up to 72 hours of complete atmospheric isolation. The thermal management of the heavy forging workshop utilized heat pipe arrays filled with liquid potassium, which transferred excess furnace heat directly into the subterranean geothermal aquifer. This closed-loop thermal dissipation prevented the formation of detectable surface heat signatures, while generating a steady supply of distilled water for the living quarters. The subterranean fortress's structural foundation was anchored into a solid granite pluton, extending 12 kilometers into the Earth's crust. This massive geological anchor provided absolute structural stability, isolating the underground laboratory from surface acoustic vibrations and seismic disturbances. The pneumatic filtration matrix incorporated catalytic converter beds coated with synthetic platinum group nanoparticles, which oxidized toxic carbon monoxide and hydrogen sulfide gases into inert carbon dioxide and solid sulfur precipitates at room temperature. The automated heavy forging press was equipped with optical pyrometers that monitored the surface temperature of newly synthesized alloys down to 0.1 degrees Celsius, ensuring that critical crystal phase transitions occurred under mathematically optimized cooling curves. The structural acoustics of the subterranean ventilation system utilized Helmholtz resonators, tuned to the dominant acoustic frequencies of the geothermal generators. This acoustic cancellation reduced the low-frequency acoustic footprint of the underground complex to less than 18 decibels at a distance of 50 meters. The thermal imaging signature of the entire subterranean base was suppressed by an external layer of aerated basalt insulation, ensuring that the surface ground temperature remained within 0.2 degrees Celsius of the surrounding ambient terrain. Navigating through the northern quadrant of the valley, Lin Xun observed a dramatic drop in ambient temperature, with jagged frost crystals encrusting the piles of rusted armor plates. The toxic sulfur mist gave way to a dense sub-zero vapor that froze the moisture in the air upon contact with solid surfaces. His HUD temperature gauge registered -42 degrees Celsius, an environmental extreme that would cause instantaneous frostbite and lung hemorrhaging in an unfortified human body. Following the thermal gradient to its absolute epicenter at the bottom of a frozen gully, Lin Xun discovered the unconscious form of Xue Linger lying amidst a cluster of shattered ice spikes. She was a 19-year-old female cultivator, clad in the torn, frost-patterned silk robes of the prestigious Quantum-Alchemical clan. Her skin had turned an alarming shade of translucent alabaster, while her silver-streaked violet hair was stiff with frozen condensation, indicating a complete systemic shutdown of her biological thermoregulation. Activating his deep diagnostic scan, Lin Xun observed a complex three-dimensional model of her internal anatomy materialize across his vision. The HUD projected flashing crimson warnings detailing the terminal stage of the 9-yin bone freezing condition, a rare congenital disorder characterized by the uncontrolled leakage of primordial frost energy from the lower spiritual meridians. The diagnostic telemetry calculated that 94% of her vestibular channels were completely blocked by micro ice crystals, leaving less than 6 hours before irreversible cellular necrosis ensued. Recognizing that Xue Linger was the sole surviving heir of the Xue clan, which had been systematically exterminated by Elder Zhao Wu's faction under fabricated charges of heresy, Lin Xun understood that their shared enemy made her a vital strategic ally. Saving her life was not merely an act of pragmatic empathy, but a critical step toward obtaining the historical blueprints and secret sect intelligence preserved within her ancestral memory. He immediately accessed his inventory of recycled materials, retrieving the core spinal bone of a hellfire lizard, 5 dried solar herbs, and 80 grams of refined red jade slag salvaged from an elder's discarded incense burner. Channeling his divine decomposition power, he dissolved the raw materials into a swirling orb of crimson liquid energy, stripping away all harsh impurities while concentrating the pure yang thermal essence into a single, perfectly balanced true yang ice melting pill. Kneeling beside the freezing maiden, Lin Xun gently parted her pale lips and placed the warm, radiant pill upon her tongue. The tablet dissolved instantly, sending a wave of concentrated, gentle yang thermal energy cascading through her digestive tract and into her frozen circulatory vessels. The medicinal power did not trigger a violent thermal shock, but rather methodically thawed the microscopic ice crystals, restoring cellular elasticity and flushing the stagnant blood back toward her heart. As the color returned to her cheeks and her breathing stabilized into a calm, rhythmic pattern, Xue Linger slowly opened her eyes to see Lin Xun standing above her with a calm, analytical expression. Despite the harrowing ordeal she had endured, her sharp intelligence recognized that the youth before her possessed an alchemical mastery that defied all known medical doctrines of the Azure Cloud continent. There was no trace of pity in his demeanor, only the steady, reassuring competence of a master who had calculated every variable of her recovery. Once she had regained sufficient physical strength, Xue Linger listened attentively as Lin Xun outlined the reality of their mutual circumstances without embellishment or pretense. In return, she shared vital intelligence regarding the internal security protocols, formation blind spots, and upcoming tournament schedule of the Nine Dragons Sect. An unbreakable strategic partnership was forged in the freezing depths of the chasm, uniting her profound historical knowledge with his absolute material mastery. The biophysical progression of the 9-yin bone freezing condition in Xue Linger's body had reached a critical thermodynamic threshold, where her core temperature had plummeted to 24 degrees Celsius. At this profound level of hypothermia, standard metabolic enzymes ceased catalytic function, leading to massive intracellular ATP depletion and catastrophic cellular membrane permeability. The true Yang ice melting pill, engineered by Lin Xun, functioned as a biochemical thermal catalyst, selectively releasing exergonic reaction energy only upon coming into direct contact with the abnormally structured crystalline ice polymers inside her vascular lumen. This prevented thermal shock to the delicate endothelial lining while dissolving vascular blockages within 240 seconds. As her autonomic nervous system resumed normal function, the System HUD monitored her electrocardiogram, which transitioned from severe sinus bradycardia back to a stable, rhythmic 70 beats per minute. Her peripheral capillary refill time dropped from 15 seconds to under 2 seconds, signaling the full restoration of peripheral microcirculation. Xue Linger's comprehensive mental repository of historical sect records contained over 1,200 classified architectural schematics, secret pill recipes, and tactical dossiers on the 32 ruling elders of the Nine Dragons Sect. This vast store of intelligence provided Lin Xun with the exact structural vulnerabilities needed to execute a flawless institutional dismantling. The thermodynamic modeling of Xue Linger's 9-yin bone-freezing condition revealed that the anomalous frost energy possessed an internal entropy state 30% lower than standard elemental ice qi. This extreme crystalline order caused the frost energy to act as a heat sink, siphoning thermal energy from adjacent living tissues at a rate of 400 watts. The True Yang ice melting pill countered this cryogenic sink by introducing an exergonic biochemical catalyst that disrupted the anomalous ice lattice without elevating systemic blood pressure. The chemical reaction produced biocompatible water and trace amounts of dissolved mineral electrolytes that were immediately absorbed by her dehydrated vascular system. Xue Linger's neurological recovery was tracked through bilateral pupillary light reflex assessments and automated electroencephalogram analysis. Within 15 minutes of pill administration, her cerebral cortical activity transitioned from severe metabolic coma patterns back to alert, coherent alpha wave rhythms. The molecular dynamics of Xue Linger's recovery demonstrated that the True Yang ice melting pill acted as a selective hydrogen bond disruptor, destabilizing only the anomalous tetrahedral ice lattices without affecting normal bodily fluid viscosity. This targeted chemical action preserved the structural integrity of her vascular endothelium while clearing 32 localized arterial blockages. Her core body temperature stabilized at 36.8 degrees Celsius within 25 minutes of pill administration, accompanied by the full restoration of normal shivering reflexes and autonomic vasomotor control. The cognitive processing latency in her cerebral cortex decreased from 800 milliseconds to 45 milliseconds as neural myelination was restored. Xue Linger's mental repository of sect intelligence included 64 confidential memorandums detailing covert alliances between the law enforcement hall and external merchant consortiums. This forensic evidence established a clear financial trail linking Elder Zhao Wu's private accounts to illicit smuggling rings operating along the border of the Heavenly Cloud Province. The biochemical kinetics of Xue Linger's vascular recovery showed a 94% reduction in circulating inflammatory cytokines within 30 minutes of pill administration. The restoration of normal endothelial nitric oxide production facilitated rapid vasodilation, restoring nutrient perfusion to previously ischemic peripheral nerve bundles. Her core body temperature regulation achieved absolute homeostasis through the activation of brown adipose tissue thermogenesis, stabilized by the gentle yang energy released from the dissolved alchemical compounds. Xue Linger's analysis of the Nine Dragons Sect's administrative archives identified 48 covert shell accounts used by Elder Zhao Wu to launder embezzled cultivation resources through external merchant guilds, providing the forensic evidence necessary to dismantle the Elder's political standing. The molecular dynamics of Xue Linger's meridian recovery showed that the True Yang ice melting pill facilitated the regeneration of the myelin sheaths surrounding her damaged peripheral nerves. This structural repair reduced sensory neuropathy and restored full motor coordination to her extremities within 30 minutes of ingestion. Her cognitive repository of sect architecture provided Lin Xun with the exact spatial coordinates of 42 subterranean escape tunnels and emergency resource vaults constructed during the founding era of the Nine Dragons Sect. With Xue Linger fully integrated into the Subterranean citadel, the duo established an efficient division of operational responsibilities. While Lin Xun focused on heavy material deconstruction, structural engineering, and high-tier artifact synthesis, Xue Linger took charge of deciphering ancient formulation logs, analyzing sect administrative movements, and establishing an indirect trade conduit with the outer rim of the mountain valley. Operating through an intermediary network of desperate outer court scavengers who visited the upper cliffs under the cover of night, Lin Xun began circulating small batches of his flawless meridian cleansing pills into the sect's underground black market. These pills, deliberately packaged in plain, unadorned stone vials, possessed zero chemical residue, causing an immediate frenzy among lower-ranking disciples who had long suffered from the debilitating side effects of low-grade, adulterated sect medicines. The economic intelligence returned by Xue Linger confirmed that the market value of a single flawless pill exceeded 50 high-grade spirit stones, a currency that Lin Xun used to purchase specific, high-entropy scrap items that the upper sect discarded without understanding their true worth. Among these acquired items were broken array plates from ancient defensive formations, damaged beast-taming collars containing rare magnetic alloys, and calcified fossilized seeds of extinct spiritual flora. By feeding these high-entropy relics through the Universal Decomposition Core, Lin Xun extracted rare elemental isotopes, including void essence, thunder-forged cobalt, and primordial chaos dust. The acquisition of these supreme-tier materials allowed his System HUD to unlock higher-echelon synthesis blueprints that had previously been grayed out due to precursor shortages, drastically broadening the scope of his manufacturing capabilities.
Lin Xun also maintained strict operational security throughout these commercial transactions, utilizing multi-layered proxy drop locations and self-destructing formation seals to ensure that no courier could trace the origin of the flawless pills back to the limestone cavern. Even the most suspicious disciplinary captains searching the perimeter found only scattered heaps of rusted scrap, unaware that an entire economic revolution was quietly siphoning wealth from the sect right beneath their feet. The influx of high-grade spirit stones and rare materials allowed Lin Xun to accelerate his personal cultivation exponentially. Moving beyond the physical body tempering realm, he initiated the complex process of qi condensation, converting the gaseous spiritual energy within his newly constructed dantian into a dense, swirling liquid ocean. With every cycle of flawless pill consumption, his spiritual reserves multiplied in purity and volume, pushing him steadily toward the foundation establishment realm.
Xue Linger's own cultivation flourished simultaneously under this abundant supply of tailored, residue-free frost-harmonizing elixirs. The congenital 9-yin frost energy that had previously threatened her life was systematically harnessed and refined, transforming from a lethal pathology into a terrifying, pure-grade ice spirit core that elevated her combat capability to unprecedented heights. As their logistical and financial dominance over the valley was consolidated, the duo turned their attention toward their most ambitious engineering project to date: the complete restoration and enhancement of a legendary weapon that had lain broken in the central waste field for more than half a millennium. The economic infiltration of the sect's black market was structured through a decentralized cell network consisting of 18 vetted outer court scavengers. Each scavenger operated independently, unaware of the identities of the other operatives, utilizing dead drop hollows concealed within discarded furnace shells along the western cliff rim. By exchanging flawless, residue-free pills for seemingly worthless high-entropy scrap, Lin Xun established an asymmetric trade arbitrage with an effective profit margin exceeding 2,000%. The upper sect disciples, blinded by their urgent need for clean medicinal pills to pass upcoming inner court trials, eagerly parted with ancient relics and rare metallurgical scrap that their instructors lacked the knowledge to evaluate. Among the deconstructed high-entropy artifacts was a fractured 7th-rank spirit array plate recovered from an ancient battlefield. The decomposition process extracted 12 milligrams of stabilized void essence, a hyperdense spatial isotope that enabled Lin Xun to construct customized dimensional storage pouches with internal volumes exceeding 500 cubic meters. The continuous accumulation of liquid spiritual qi within Lin Xun's dantian reached a volume of 480 milliliters, undergoing spontaneous rotational compression into a high-density energetic vortex. This vortex generated a self-sustaining gravitational field that drew environmental spiritual particles directly through his skin pores, accelerating his passive cultivation rate by fourfold. The logistics of the shadow trade network utilized 18 concealed dead drop caches distributed across a 6-kilometer perimeter along the base of the eastern cliffs. Each cache was protected by an automated proximity ward that would dissolve the contents into neutral dust if opened without the correct harmonic vibrational frequency. The economic yield from the black market operations generated a daily revenue of 2,400 spirit stones, which was immediately reinvested into acquiring rare, high-entropy mineral specimens and damaged ancient formation scrolls. This steady accumulation of capital transformed the Subterranean Citadel into a premier manufacturing hub, operating completely outside the sect's regulatory taxation. Lin Xun's internal qi refinement progressed into the late foundation establishment stage, as the density of his liquid spiritual ocean approached that of liquid mercury. The rotational momentum of the central vortex generated a localized gravitational field that compressed incoming spiritual particles into crystalline microplatelets with 99% structural purity. The economic arbitrage model implemented by Lin Xun generated an average return on investment of 2,200% per transaction cycle. By converting low-cost medicinal precursor salvaged from trash heaps into flawless high-demand pills, the Subterranean operation accumulated sufficient liquidity to corner the local market on rare high-entropy mineral salvage. The dimensional expansion geometry of the fabricated storage pouches utilized a stabilized 5-dimensional Calabi-Yau metric that prevented gravitational leakage. The internal environment maintained 0 ambient humidity, 0 oxygen, and absolute temporal stillness, ensuring that perishable organic ingredients and volatile beast cores could be stored indefinitely without chemical degradation. Lin Xun's internal spiritual ocean achieved a continuous laminar flow regime within his 12 primary meridians, eliminating the energetic vortices and turbulence that typically caused meridian fatigue in high-tier cultivators. His resting qi circulation velocity reached 12 meters per second, enabling instantaneous energy deployment to any bodily extremity upon demand. The financial mechanics of the shadow trade arbitrage maintained a liquidity reserve of 50,000 high-grade spirit stones within the Subterranean vault. This capital reserve allowed Lin Xun to purchase high-value ancient artifacts directly from desperate inner court disciples without intermediary brokers. The spatial metric engineering of the custom storage pouches achieved a dimensional compression ratio of 5,000 to 1, allowing immense structural components and heavy manufacturing equipment to be transported in containers no larger than a standard coin purse. Lin Xun's internal spiritual ocean reached a steady-state hydrodynamic circulation of 18 meters per second, enabling him to channel massive bursts of kinetic qi to his extremities without experiencing vascular pressure spikes or localized tissue inflammation. The economic arbitrage algorithm developed by Lin Xun tracked the price fluctuations of 72 distinct medicinal herbs across the provincial market, identifying optimal trading windows to maximize the acquisition of rare metallurgical scrap from outer court couriers. The dimensional storage pouches manufactured during this period incorporated fail-safe gravitational locks that rendered the containers inaccessible to external spiritual divination spells, preserving the absolute confidentiality of their contents. Deep within the heavy forging chamber of the Subterranean base, Lin Xun and Xue Linger stood before a massive slate platform upon which rested the 3 corroded fragments of the Heaven-Cleaving Dragon Halberd. This 2.5-meter polearm had once served as the signature war weapon of the founding patriarch of the Nine Dragons Sect before it was fractured during the catastrophic battle against the thousand-winged demon sovereign 500 years ago. Saturated with demonic corrosive curses and suffering total internal lattice failure, it had been discarded as an unrepairable relic of antiquity. Xue Linger traced her fingers gently above the blackened metal, explaining that the halberd's core was forged from primordial black star steel, an ultra-dense stellar alloy that could only be melted by the 9th-rank true solar flame. For conventional blacksmiths and artifact masters in the sect, repairing the weapon without destroying its delicate spirit inscriptions was an engineering impossibility. However, for Lin Xun, the limitations of thermal metallurgy were entirely bypassed by the quantum-level manipulation of his divine core. Activating the analytical scanning HUD, Lin Xun projected a comprehensive cross-sectional blueprint that mapped every microscopic fracture line, identified 12 cursed demonic nodes, and simulated an optimized structural reconstruction that promised to elevate the halberd's energy output by 120% over its original historical peak. The molecular recrystallization progressed with breathtaking mathematical elegance under Lin Xun's uninterrupted mental focus. The 3 severed fragments of black star steel fused together seamlessly, leaving no visible seam or structural weakness along the shaft. Delicate veins of glowing golden alloy coursed along the length of the polearm, forming the intricate silhouettes of twin coiling dragons that crackled with arcs of violet thunder and destructive kinetic potential. The crescent blade at the halberd's apex was honed to a submolecular edge, capable of severing atmospheric air currents and energetic barriers through sheer kinetic sharpness alone. As the synthesis completed and the majestic weapon descended into Lin Xun's grasp, a profound energetic shockwave rippled through the cavern, causing the heavy stone floor to vibrate and generating a resonant hum of absolute obedience from an Earth-grade peak divine artifact. Xue Linger watched in breathless awe as Lin Xun executed a fluid, sweeping arc with the halberd, leaving a lingering trail of violet lightning and distorted gravitational waves in the air. The weapon was perfectly balanced down to the microgram, responding instantaneously to his neuromuscular impulses, as though it were a natural extension of his own physical body. With his sovereign weapon restored to perfection and his personal cultivation breaking through into the 8th layer of foundation establishment, Lin Xun recognized that the defensive phase of his operations had officially concluded. The corrupt hierarchy of the upper mountain would soon feel the crushing weight of the legacy they had so arrogantly discarded. The metallurgical restoration of the Heaven-Cleaving Dragon Halberd required the simultaneous management of 3 distinct elemental lattice systems: the dense stellar matrix of the primordial black star steel, the high conductivity pathways of the refined gold, and the volatile electromagnetic potential of the Abyssal Thunderbeast core. Under the guidance of the System HUD's real-time molecular simulation, Lin Xun aligned the atomic spin of the black star steel particles along a single uniform magnetic axis. This structural alignment eliminated all internal magnetic resistance, allowing kinetic shockwaves to propagate along the halberd shaft at hypersonic velocities exceeding 5,000 meters per second upon impact. The submolecular edge of the crescent blade was engineered with a parabolic wedge profile, tapering down to a single atomic layer of carbon-doped star iron. This extreme sharpness enabled the weapon to disrupt the intermolecular bonds of target materials through pure mechanical pressure, bypassing standard energy shields without requiring excessive spiritual chi expenditure. Weighing exactly 142 kilograms, the restored halberd possessed a dynamic center of mass positioned precisely 72 centimeters below the blade collar. This optimal balance allowed Lin Xun to execute angular acceleration maneuvers with an angular velocity exceeding 1,200 degrees per second during close quarters combat.
The restoration of the Heaven-Cleaving Dragon Halberd required 84 distinct alchemical fusion phases, each managed with sub-millisecond precision by the System HUD. The integration of the Abyssal Thunderbeast core established an internal electromagnetic circuit that resonated at 54 MHz, creating an automated plasma sheath along the weapon's cutting edge during active combat.
The structural balancing of the Black Star steel polearm was verified using high-speed rotational testing at 6,000 revolutions per minute. The analysis confirmed zero vibrational wobble along the longitudinal axis, ensuring that kinetic energy transmitted from Lin Xun's wrists transferred directly into the target without dissipative mechanical loss. Xue Linger contributed to the restoration by applying 3 ancient binding runes derived from the lost archives of the Xue clan. These runes acted as energetic regulators, preventing the volatile thunder core from leaking electromagnetic radiation that could interfere with Lin Xun's internal meridian circulation. The structural restoration of the Heaven-Cleaving Dragon Halberd incorporated 24 internal shock-absorbing dampers forged from refined titanium bone composite. These mechanical dampers absorbed the high-frequency recoil vibrations generated during supersonic blade impacts, protecting Lin Xun's forearm cundants from repetitive stress injuries during protracted melee combat. The electromagnetic resonance circuit embedded within the polearm was calibrated to produce a localized ionization field that stripped electrons from atmospheric oxygen atoms, creating a thin ozone cushion along the blade surface that reduced aerodynamic drag by 34% during high-speed rotational attacks. The weapon's balance point was tested across 14 dynamic combat postures, confirming that the center of percussion aligned precisely with the primary cutting node of the crescent blade. This mechanical harmony maximized kinetic energy transfer into the target while reducing the rotational torque experienced by the wielder's wrists to near zero. The metallurgical synthesis of the Heaven-Cleaving Dragon Halberd achieved an ultimate tensile strength of 2,400 megapascals, with a fracture toughness exceeding 120 megapascals root meter. This extraordinary material resilience allowed the weapon to sever dense defensive formations without sustaining microchipping along the blade. The electromagnetic resonance circuit embedded within the halberd shaft generated a localized electromagnetic pulse upon impact that temporarily paralyzed the spiritual sensory organs of adjacent enemy combatants. Xue Linger's ancient binding runes established a stable energetic feedback loop that recycled 85% of the electromagnetic energy dissipated during active combat strikes, extending the weapon's operational duration during prolonged engagements. The dynamic mass distribution of the Heaven-Cleaving Dragon Halberd was validated through high-speed kinetic impact testing, confirming that the weapon dissipated 94% of target impact energy into rotational cutting torque rather than transferring mechanical shock to the wielder. The electromagnetic plasma sheath along the blade edge operated at an effective temperature of 14,000 kelvins during high-output combat discharges, allowing the weapon to vaporize incoming projectile spells on contact. The quiet rhythm of the Abyssal Trash Valley was abruptly shattered when the thunderous howls of 6 armored windwolf mounts echoed across the eastern cliff trails. A heavily equipped disciplinary patrol unit, commanded directly by Captain Gu Yang, the most ruthless enforcer in Elder Zhao Wu's inner circle, shuns death by toxic poisoning or execute him on the spot if he had somehow survived. Mounted upon his massive alpha wolf, Gu Yang surveyed the desolate landscape with a condescending sneer, clutching a barbed iron whip dripping with corrosive emerald venom. As his soldiers systematically kicked down the fragile huts of the terrified outer scavengers, Gu Yang guided his mount toward the limestone crevice, expecting to find a rotting corpse. Instead, he was met with the sight of Lin Xun standing calmly in the open, clad in clean gray linen, his posture relaxed, and his obsidian eyes cold as a frozen lake. Stunned by the complete absence of physical degradation, coughing fits, or gangrenous wounds that should have afflicted any crippled disciple in this lethal environment, Gu Yang's arrogance instantly morphed into intense suspicion. Shouting accusations of treason, the captain declared that Lin Xun had clearly stolen forbidden spirit herbs from the sect's medicinal groves to sustain his life, a crime punishable by immediate summary execution without trial. Without waiting for a response, Gu Yang cracked his venomous whip directly toward Lin Xun's neck with lethal velocity. Before the barbed steel could traverse half the distance, Lin Xun's silhouette vanished from the sight of the patrol soldiers like a dispersing phantom. In the subsequent millisecond, Lin Xun materialized directly upon the saddle of the Alpha Wolf, his right hand clamping around Gu Yang's wrist with an iron grip that radiated faint golden alchemical runes. The System HUD in Lin Xun's eyes instantly dissected the biophysical qi circulation within Gu Yang's arm, locating 3 critical structural weaknesses along the radial bone within microseconds. With a precise, controlled burst of kinetic energy, Lin Xun reversed the flow of toxic qi within Gu Yang's weapon, forcing the corrosive energy to backfire into the captain's own meridian pathways. The resulting energetic detonation shattered the bones and tendons of Gu Yang's right arm into splintered fragments, cutting short his agonized scream as Lin Xun hurled him violently against the rocky ground with terrifying physical force. The remaining 5 patrol guards panicked, attempting to draw their broadswords and activate their combat talismans, but before they could complete a single step, Xue Linger stepped out from the illusion array and raised her frost jade flute. Playing a sharp, piercing acoustic note, she unleashed a wave of sub-zero cryogenic qi that instantly froze the legs of the soldiers and their beast mounts in solid blocks of crystalline ice, completely immobilizing the entire squad within 3 seconds. Looking down at the writhing, terrified form of Gu Yang beneath his boot, Lin Xun wasted no breath on emotional diatribes. With clinical precision, he confiscated the captain's disciplinary command token and spatial storage pouch, using his divine decomposition power to instantly dissolve Elder Zhao Wu's soul-binding imprint. Inside the pouch, Lin Xun discovered several secret transmission jade slips that contained complete, undeniable records of illegal resource embezzlement, assassinations of promising disciples, and high treason against the sect. Securing these vital evidentiary records within his own dimensional storage, Lin Xun neutralized the memory meridians of the captured patrolmen with a series of precision acupressure strikes. Leaving them unconscious amidst the melting frost, he and Xue Linger returned to the Subterranean Citadel to finalize the deployment strategy for the Grand Sect tournament scheduled to commence on the following dawn. The biomechanical analysis of Captain Gai Yang's combat posture revealed severe muscular imbalances, resulting from years of asymmetric whip-wielding. His right trapezius and latissimus dorsi muscles exhibited significant hypertrophy, accompanied by chronic degenerative microtears in the right rotator cuff that reduced his defensive reaction speed on his right flank by 18%. When Lin Xun reversed the flow of corrosive qi through Gu Yang's barbed whip, the energetic back pressure exceeded 900 kilopascals within the weapon's internal spirit channels. This massive pressure spike exceeded the mechanical yield strength of the weapon's conduits, causing a catastrophic structural blowout that tore through the captain's brachial artery and median nerve. Xue Linger's cryogenic attack utilized an ultra-low-frequency sonic vibration delivered through her frost jade flute, creating a standing acoustic wave that nucleated instantaneous ice crystal formation within the moisture of the surrounding air. The resulting sub-zero blast dropped the ambient temperature to minus 60 degrees Celsius in 40 milliseconds, flash freezing the patrolman's boots to the granite bedrock. The confiscated transmission jade slips contained 72 gigabytes of decrypted alchemical logs, secret tribunal transcripts, and covert banking ledgers, documenting the systematic embezzlement of over 4 million spirit stones over a 28-year period by Elder Zhao Wu's criminal syndicate. The tactical reconstruction of Captain Gu Yang's ambush attempt showed that the Enforcer Squad had deployed in an outdated 3-2 convex wedge formation, designed for crowd control rather than high-tier individual combat. This tactical mismatch allowed Lin Xun to exploit the geometric dead zones between the flank scouts and neutralize the commanding officer before the support units could react. The energetic back pressure induced in Guoyang's whip was calculated at 940 kilopascals, exceeding the elastic yield point of the weapon's inner spirit conduits by 300%. The resulting explosive blowout caused extensive muscular tearing along the flexor digitorum profundus and destroyed the median nerve beyond surgical repair. The decrypted transmission jade slips revealed that Elder Zhao Wu had orchestrated 19 covert assassinations of talented outer court disciples over a 12-year period to eliminate potential rivals to his son's ascendancy. Each incident was documented with time-stamped orders, mercenary payment ledgers, and forged coroner reports. The tactical breakdown of Captain Gu Yang's disciplinary squad revealed that the soldiers lacked inter-unit acoustic signaling protocols, relying exclusively on visual hand gestures that were completely neutralized by Xue Linger's localized frost fog. This communication breakdown prevented the flank guards from coordinating their defensive formations during Lin Xun's initial strike. The forensic decryption of the confiscated jade slips extracted 42 separate transaction receipts detailing the purchase of banned neurotoxic alkaloids from black market smugglers. These records confirmed that Elder Zhao Wu had systematically poisoned 3 previous outer court grandmasters who had refused to comply with his extortion schemes. The temporary memory meridian seal applied to the surviving patrolmen utilized precision acupressure blocks that suspended synaptic transmission across their hippocampus regions, ensuring that they retained zero cognitive recollection of the subterranean citadel's physical coordinates upon awakening. The forensic analysis of Captain Gua Yang's enforcer squad revealed that the guards operated under an unverified disciplinary mandate that lacked the official seal of the sect master. This legal irregularity confirmed that the patrol was acting as an unauthorized private hit squad on behalf of Elder Zhao Wu's personal interests. The energetic back pressure induced within Guoyang's weapon caused catastrophic dielectric breakdown across the weapon's internal spirit channels, vaporizing the surrounding leather grips and inducing third-degree electrical burns across the captain's right palm and forearm. The acoustic disruption protocol deployed by Xue Linger maintained a 30 decibel signal attenuation across all standard emergency transmission frequencies, preventing the patrol's distress beacons from registering on the sect's central monitoring grid. The tactical assessment of the patrol unit's neutralizing engagement confirmed that zero acoustic or energetic distress signals had breached the local containment ward. The captured disciplinary tokens were systematically cloned and re-encrypted to provide Lin Xun with authorized security access to the sect's outer perimeter gates. The forensic dossier compiled from the decrypted jade slips was indexed into 12 distinct legal categories, providing verifiable evidence of embezzlement, murder, and high treason that adhered to the statutory standards of the Continental Martial Alliance. Within the quiet sanctuary of the central analysis room, Lin Xun projected the extracted contents of Guoyang's transmission jade slips across a multi-layered holographic display. The data revealed a sprawling network of institutional embezzlement spanning over 3 decades, orchestrated by Elder Zhao Wu and a cabal of high-ranking elders within the law enforcement hall. Thousands of high-grade spirit stones and cultivation resources allocated for outer court disciples had been systematically siphoned to fuel the artificial cultivation advancement of Zhao Feng and his sycophants. Xue Linger examined the financial logs with a grim, knowing gaze, pointing out specific ledger entries that corresponded directly to the orchestrated downfall and massacre of her own Xue clan. The fabricated charges that had destroyed her family were documented in meticulous detail, including signatures, bribery payments to corrupted judges, and the exact inventory of pill recipes stolen by the Zhao faction. Every piece of evidence required to legally and morally dismantle the Elder's authority was now organized into an indisputable dossier. Lin Xun simultaneously engaged his analytical mapping algorithms to model the defensive architecture of the Nine Dragons Peak. By cross-referencing Xue Linger's intimate knowledge of the mountain's topography with the transmission frequencies found within the command token, the HUD generated a real-time, three-dimensional blueprint of the entire upper sect, highlighting the exact structural nodes, power relays, and energetic weaknesses of the Grand Mountain Protecting Formation. The simulation indicated that the sect's primary barrier operated on a centralized hexagonal relay system powered by 6 subterranean spirit crystal matrices. Lin Xun calculated that by introducing a high-frequency harmonic disruption at specific vibrational resonance frequencies, he could temporarily disable the upper defensive shield without triggering the emergency alarm wards, granting him unimpeded aerial entry directly into the central martial arena. Recognizing that total victory required not only the physical annihilation of his oppressors, but the absolute moral exposure of their crimes before the entire martial community, Lin Xun designed a multi-phase operational timeline. The plan accounted for every potential variable, including the direct intervention of the Golden Core Realm Sectmaster, unexpected defensive countermeasures, and the psychological volatility of the crowd. Throughout the night, Lin Xun and Xue Linger performed exhaustive tactical dry runs, simulating every combat engagement down to the millisecond. Every movement, technique deployment, and evidentiary reveal was choreographed with mathematical precision, eliminating all reliance on chance or emotional impulse. They were not merely seeking revenge, they were executing a calculated systemic purge. As the first rays of dawn began to pierce the dense smog layer above the Abyssal Trash Valley, Lin Xun stood before the weapon racks of his workshop, fastening the reinforced black wrist guards onto his arms and securing the Heaven-Cleaving Dragon Halberd across his back. He felt the calm, rhythmic hum of his Foundation establishment peak cultivation pulsing through his veins with absolute clarity. The hour of judgment had arrived. The discarded refuse of the abyss was prepared to rise and shatter the illusions of the gilded paradise above. The structural simulation of the Nine Dragons mountain defense grid revealed that the primary mountain protecting barrier operated on a harmonic frequency of 42.8 kHz, synchronized across 6 subterranean crystal relays. By introducing a phase-inverted resonant wave at 42.8 kHz, Lin Xun could generate localized destructive wave interference, creating an invisible aperture 5 meters wide without triggering the central alarm matrix. The tactical dossier on Elder Jiao Wu, compiled by Xue Linger, detailed the Elder's combat habits across 43 recorded duels over 3 decades. The analysis indicated an 89% preference for opening assaults, utilizing sweeping horizontal broadsword slashes powered by high-temperature crimson solar chi, leaving a 300 millisecond recovery window on his upper left thoracic quadrant. The logistical mapping of the Sky Dragon Plaza identified 9 primary crowd egress corridors, 3 emergency defensive bunkers, and the exact spatial coordinates of the VIP grandstand. Lin Xun choreographed 4 alternate contingency routes to ensure that any collateral blast waves generated during the upcoming confrontation would be redirected harmlessly into the reinforced stone arena boundary walls. Throughout the night, Lin Xun performed 600 virtual combat iterations against holographic simulations of Jiao Wu and Zhao Feng within his cognitive HUD interface. Every possible tactical deviation, including the activation of forbidden sacrificial blood arts and hidden artifact talismans, was modeled and countered with mathematical certainty. The acoustic mapping of the Nine Dragons mountain defense grid demonstrated that the primary barrier's protective dome was anchored to 6 subterranean granite obelisks inscribed with earth-rank shielding runes. Lin Xun calculated that by disrupting the 3rd and 5th resonance nodes simultaneously, he could create an unstable harmonic node that would allow unimpeded aerial passage for a duration of 90 seconds. The tactical profile on Elder Jiao Wu confirmed that the Elder's combat style was heavily dependent on overwhelming physical intimidation and wide-angle area of effect fire spells. His defensive parry recovery time was measured at 420 milliseconds, creating a massive tactical vulnerability against precision kinetic thrusts. Lin Xun and Xue Linger finalized their operational sequence across 24 distinct contingency scenarios, including the potential intervention of external sect delegates and the sudden activation of emergency blood sacrifice wards. Every anticipated variable was assigned a mathematically optimized countermeasure. The simulation of the Nine Dragons Mountain defense grid indicated that the barrier's primary energy conduit traversed a subterranean granite tunnel situated 80 meters beneath the Sky Dragon Plaza. Lin Xun calculated that by directing a focused sonic disruption pulse through the mountain's natural drainage shafts, he could induce a temporary phase inversion in the barrier's harmonic frequency without triggering the alarm arrays. The physiological profile of Elder Zhao Wu confirmed that the elder suffered from chronic arterial stiffness and reduced cardiac ejection fraction caused by decades of uncontrolled consumption of synthetic fire attribute qi stimulants. This cardiovascular vulnerability increased his susceptibility to instantaneous vasovagal syncope when subjected to high-frequency acoustic shockwaves. Lin Xun established a multi-layered cryptographic backup of all decrypted judicial records, embedding the data across 12 redundant jade matrices that were distributed to trustworthy neutral delegates prior to the tournament's commencement, guaranteeing that the evidence would survive even if the primary broadcast array was compromised. The simulation of the Nine Dragons Mountain barrier identified 12 secondary resonance harmonic frequencies that could be exploited to induce localized destructive wave interference without triggering the primary barrier alarm circuits. The tactical dossier on Elder Zhao Wu revealed that the Elder's signature combat technique, the Crimson Solar Severance, exhibited an angular blind spot of 45 degrees along his left rear quadrant during the peak of his downward swing. Lin Xun and Xue Linger established an encrypted optical transmission link between the descent platform and 12 remote projection relays positioned around the perimeter of the Sky Dragon Plaza, ensuring the simultaneous broadcast of the judicial evidence across all spectator sections. The mathematical disruption model for the mountain protecting barrier was finalized with a temporal precision of 12 milliseconds, ensuring that the barrier's protective dome would open and close seamlessly around the descent platform without alerting the central monitoring towers. The contingency tactical matrix accounted for the potential deployment of third-rank defensive array talismans by the surrounding elders, pre-calculating the exact kinetic trajectory needed to neutralize each talisman's power relay within 3 milliseconds of activation. Before departing for the upper summit, Lin Xun initiated a final massive deconstruction cycle across the entire western slag sector, to maximize his immediate reserves of raw spiritual energy. Standing atop a 60-meter ridge of discarded armaments and calcified spirit bones, he expanded the resonance field of his Universal Decomposition Core to its absolute theoretical maximum, enveloping an area of 3 square kilometers in an immense dome of shimmering golden light. The resulting spectacle was breathtaking in its sheer scale. Over 500,000 individual shards of broken swords, shattered shields, cracked cauldrons, and oxidized armor plates disintegrated simultaneously, transforming the jagged wasteland into a colossal sea of glowing golden particles. The heavy, sulfurous stench that had choked the valley for millennia was completely incinerated within seconds, replaced by a pure, celestial ozone fragrance that invigorated the surrounding atmosphere. Under the precise guidance of his analytical consciousness, this immense ocean of purified matter was compressed and filtered into 3 distinct energy conduits. The first conduit synthesized 10,000 high-grade spirit foundation pellets, which rained down into the subterranean storage vaults to serve as the economic bedrock for his future sect. The second conduit produced a set of 500 immaculate, uniform spiritual swords, destined to arm his future disciples with flawless equipment. The third and most concentrated conduit of pure elemental essence was drawn directly into Lin Xun's own biological core. The massive influx of residue-free spiritual energy saturated his 12 primary meridians and condensed the swirling liquid sea within his dantian into a dense, crystalline sphere of liquid gold. His cultivation surged past the final barriers of the Foundation Establishment realm, touching the absolute pinnacle threshold and granting him an energetic reserve comparable to an early-stage Golden Core master. His physical senses expanded to an astonishing degree, allowing him to perceive the acoustic vibrations of insect wings 3 leagues away and detect the subtlest shifts in local atmospheric pressure. The golden runes inscribed along his right forearm deepened in color, becoming permanent energetic tattoos that pulsed in direct harmony with the cosmic laws of material transformation. Xue Linger, who stood at the perimeter of the deconstruction dome, watched the miraculous transformation of the valley with profound reverence. The desolate graveyard had been cleared of its toxic curse, revealing pristine bedrock and flowing underground springs of purified mineral water. In a single afternoon, Lin Xun had demonstrated the capacity to reshape planetary geography through the supreme power of absolute upcycling. Securing the entrance of their fortified citadel with automated defense wards, Lin Xun and Xue Linger prepared their ascension vectors. Utilizing a customized aerial platform constructed from lightweight aerodynamic alloys and powered by a dual elemental propulsion core, they plotted a direct trajectory through the cloud layer toward the Nine Dragons Peak. With their preparations flawlessly complete and their resolve unshakable, they launched into the sky, leaving behind the transformed abyss to claim their rightful place at the summit of the martial world. The mass deconstruction of the 3-square-kilometer western slag field processed approximately 720,000 metric tons of mixed metallic and organic refuse in 540 seconds. The energetic yield from this colossal molecular breakdown equaled the total annual spiritual output of 6 medium-grade spirit stone mines operating at full capacity. The 10,000 synthesized spirit foundation pellets were stored within vacuum-sealed basalt vaults lined with lead-doped star iron to prevent ambient energy dissipation. Each pellet possessed a half-life of over 500 years without degradation, providing an unshakable financial foundation for the future establishment of the Immortal Sovereign Upcycling Sect. The 500 synthesized spiritual swords were forged with uniform dimensional tolerances within 0.02 millimeters, each blade featuring an integrated 3-stage spirit amplification circuit that increased an ordinary disciple's chi cutting power by 75% without requiring advanced sword intent. Lin Xun's dantian underwent a final phase transition as the liquid gold spiritual sea condensed into an ultra-dense spherical core, measuring 3.6 centimeters in diameter. This core emitted a constant gravitational field of 0.8 Gs within his abdominal cavity, stabilizing his internal energetic equilibrium against external pressure waves. The mass decomposition of the western slag sector processed over 800,000 metric tons of mixed material in under 10 minutes, generating 48 gigawatt-hours of pure elemental energy that was directed into subterranean storage capacitors. The environmental cleanup permanently eliminated the toxic sulfur fumes from the Western Valley, restoring clean air quality across 80 square kilometers. The 500 synthesized spiritual swords were manufactured with standardized blade dimensions of 92 centimeters in length and 3.4 centimeters in width, featuring diamond-hard carbon-doped cutting edges that maintained molecular sharpness through thousands of high-impact strikes. Lin Xun's personal cultivation reached the absolute summit of the Foundation Establishment realm as the golden core in his dantian stabilized into a perfectly spherical crystalline mass with 0 internal voids. His energetic capacity was now mathematically equivalent to an early-stage golden core elder, granting him the stamina to sustain protracted high-tier combat operations. The energetic yield from the mass deconstruction of the western slag field generated an instantaneous power surge of 600 megawatts, which was successfully dissipated through the subterranean capacitive grid without causing local seismic displacement. The environmental transformation reduced the ambient airborne particulate count from 14,000 parts per million down to 12 parts per million within 12 minutes. Pharmacological integrity remained intact across centuries of potential storage. The economic valuation of this stockpile was estimated at 500,000 high-grade spirit stones on the open continental market. The 500 synthesized spiritual swords were manufactured with standardized blade curvatures that optimized the angle of incidence during slicing maneuvers, increasing the effective cutting depth by 40% against standard leather and chainmail armor, without requiring additional physical exertion from the wielder. The mass deconstruction of the western slag field eliminated 2.4 million tons of toxic alchemical sediments, restoring the local soil pH to 6.8 and allowing native subterranean vegetation to re-establish biological growth within the purified valley floor. The 10,000 synthesized spirit foundation pellets were categorized into standardized dosage batches of 50 tablets each, packaged in impact-resistant star iron canisters designed for rapid field distribution. Lin Xun's golden dantian achieved an energetic density mathematically equivalent to a first-rank golden core, granting him the internal spiritual capacity required to sustain continuous supersonic flight and high-output weapon discharges simultaneously. The mass deconstruction of the western slag sector cleared 3 square kilometers of hazardous terrain, restoring the local biodiversity and providing an expansive staging ground for the future physical infrastructure of the Immortal Sovereign Upcycling Sect. The 500 synthesized spiritual swords were stored in modular containment racks, equipped with automated environmental stabilization fields, ensuring that the weapons remained in factory pristine condition until distributed to future disciples. The Grand Sky Dragon Plaza of the Nine Dragons Sect was overflowing with more than 50,000 spectators, elders, and distinguished delegates representing the premier martial sects of the Azure Cloud continent. Banners of crimson silk and gold leaf fluttered from towering white marble pillars, while celestial music played by court musicians drifted through the incense-scented air. The occasion was the opening ceremony of the Grand Tournament of 100 Clans, an event organized primarily to showcase the unassailable prestige and martial might of the sect's rising generation. At the center of the elevated VIP grandstand, seated upon a lavish throne of carved mahogany and gilded dragon scales, sat law enforcement elder Zhao Wu. Dressed in magnificent crimson and gold elder robes with a heavy bronze dragon belt, he stroked his silver-streaked beard with visible satisfaction. Flanked by dozens of compliant elders and obsequious clan leaders, Zhao Wu felt absolute confidence that his decades of political maneuvering and ruthless resource hoarding had finally cemented his family's perpetual dominance over the sect. Below the grandstand, standing in the center of the vast white marble combat stage, was his son, Zhao Fang. Clad in an extravagant inner disciple silk robe, embroidered with golden threads and adorned with rare jade pendants, the young master gripped an ornate broadsword set with a massive ruby. Zhao Fang projected an aura of arrogant superiority, deliberately releasing waves of crimson flame chi to demonstrate his newly attained 5th layer foundation establishment cultivation to the cheering crowds. To the untrained eyes of the spectators, Zhao Feng appeared as an exceptional, once-in-a-century prodigy whose rapid advancement was the result of supreme martial talent and heaven-defying comprehension. However, beneath his polished exterior lay an unstable, chemically bloated energetic foundation constructed entirely upon the consumption of hundreds of stolen high-grade pills whose residual toxins had been temporarily suppressed by expensive stabilizing talismans. The master of ceremonies stepped forward, raising a golden scroll to officially proclaim Zhao Feng as the head disciple of the new generation and the sole inheritor of the sect's grand ancestral legacy. The gathered crowd erupted into deafening applause, with sycophantic elders bowing low in deference to the rising power of the Zhao lineage. Zhao Feng unsheathed his ruby broadsword, raising it toward the heavens with a haughty, contemptuous smirk as he prepared to deliver his acceptance speech. The atmosphere of self-congratulatory triumph reached its absolute crescendo as Elder Zhao Wu raised his goblet of spiritual wine to toast his son's ascendancy. Not a single person among the 50,000 attendees suspected that the foundation upon which this celebration rested was on the verge of experiencing a catastrophic, violent collapse. High above the festive plaza, cloaked behind the thick layer of overcast thunderclouds, two figures stood poised at the edge of an aerial descent vector, their eyes locked onto the central stage with predatory precision. The countdown reached 0, and the sky above the Nine Dragons Peak suddenly split open with the deafening roar of a celestial thunderbolt. The biochemical profiling of Zhao Feng's spiritual aura performed by Lin Xun's optical HUD from 3 kilometers away revealed severe cellular toxicity caused by the consumption of over 40 adulterated crimson dragon pills. His liver enzymes were elevated by 600%, and his heart rate exhibited erratic sinus arrhythmias, masked by the temporary euphoric effects of spirit-calming talismans. The 50,000 spectators assembled across the 30 tiers of the marble amphitheater created an acoustic background noise level of 94 decibels. The structural resonance of the arena, while robust against conventional ground attacks, possessed a fundamental harmonic frequency of 12 Hz that rendered the central marble stage vulnerable to vertical kinetic shear forces. Elder Zhao Wu's crimson and gold elder robes were woven from third-rank fire silk, reinforced with thin plates of volcanic titanium, providing 60% resistance against thermal energy attacks, but offering minimal protection against hypervelocity kinetic piercing strikes. As the ceremonial master unfurled the golden scroll to proclaim Zhao Feng's ascendancy, the young master's peripheral blood vessels were dilated to maximum capacity by adrenaline and vanity, creating an optimal biological vulnerability for Lin Xun's impending energetic decomposition strike. The acoustic architecture of the Sky Dragon Plaza amplified crowd vocalizations through parabolic marble reflectors positioned along the outer perimeter of the stadium. This structural design created an echo chamber that concentrated acoustic energy directly onto the central stage, providing Lin Xun with an optimal medium to deploy resonant sonic disruption techniques. The pharmacological state of Zhao Feng showed acute systemic hypertension and elevated serum dopamine levels, resulting from the heavy consumption of crimson dragon pills. His sensory perception was artificially heightened, while his rational cognitive filtering was impaired by 55%, leaving him highly susceptible to psychological baiting. Elder Zhao Wu's ceremonial seating position was located 42 meters above the arena floor on a cantilevered marble balcony with a structural load capacity of 60 metric tons. Lin Xun calculated that an acoustic shockwave exceeding 140 decibels directed at the balcony's support struts would induce immediate structural resonance failure. The acoustic dynamics of the Sky Dragon Plaza were mapped using real-time atmospheric telemetry from Lin Xun's optical HUD, identifying 24 parabolic reflection nodes along the marble stadium tiers that would amplify the descent shockwave into a disorienting sonic boom, capable of incapacitating the tournament guards without causing permanent auditory trauma. The pharmacological state of Zhao Feng showed acute systemic vasoconstriction and elevated blood lactate levels, resulting from the premature metabolic breakdown of his unrefined crimson dragon pills. His neuromuscular coordination was degraded by 30%, masking his true physical fatigue beneath a veneer of drug-induced manic aggression. Elder Jia Wu's ceremonial seating position placed him directly within the primary acoustic focal zone of the stadium, ensuring that the kinetic shockwave generated by Lin Xun's halberd impact would subject the Elder's personal chi barrier to maximum mechanical stress from the opening millisecond of the engagement. The acoustic mapping of the Sky Dragon Plaza indicated that the structural reverberation time of the marble amphitheater was 2.8 seconds. Lin Xun calculated that by timing the descent shockwave to match the natural acoustic period of the stadium, the resulting sonic boom would produce maximum psychological intimidation with minimal physical damage to the architecture. The biochemical profile of Zhao Feng confirmed that the young master was experiencing acute pharmacological psychosis induced by the synergistic interaction of multiple unrefined stimulant pills, impairing his ability to assess tactical danger or execute defensive maneuvers. Elder Zhao Wu's ceremonial grandstand was located at an elevation of 42 meters, supported by 12 marble columns that lacked horizontal shear reinforcement, creating an optimal structural target for secondary acoustic shockwave displacement. The acoustic mapping of the Sky Dragon Plaza established that the central marble stage acted as a natural acoustic amplifier for frequencies between 200 and 800 Hz. Lin Xun utilized this structural feature to ensure that his judicial announcement would achieve uniform intelligibility across all 50,000 spectator seats. The biochemical degradation of Zhao Feng's spiritual foundation continued at a rate of 4% per hour, accelerating the systemic collapse of his dantian as the unrefined pill toxins saturated his hepatic and renal tissues. A deafening sonic boom tore through the upper atmosphere, shattering the ornamental silk banners and causing the protective barrier above the Sky Dragon Plaza to violently fracture into millions of sparkling crystalline fragments. Before the sect's defense masters could comprehend the source of the breach, a colossal beam of violet lightning and golden gravity energy plummeted from the heavens, striking the exact center of the marble combat stage with cataclysmic momentum. The titanic kinetic impact generated a massive shockwave that pulverized 500 square meters of reinforced white marble into powdered stone, tossing aside decorative pillars and sending the nearest tournament guards flying through the air. A dense plume of dust and crackling electrical discharge billowed across the arena, obscuring the stage in a shroud of swirling energy. The 50,000 spectators fell into dead silence, their celebratory cheers instantly replaced by paralyzing shock and confusion. As the dust cloud slowly parted under the pressure of a rising energetic vortex, the silhouette of a single youth was revealed, standing immovably at the center of the impact crater. Lin Xun stood with his 2.5-meter Heaven-Cleaving Dragon Halberd planted firmly into the shattered stone floor, its twin dragon engravings crackling with violet thunder. Dressed in simple, dark gray linen with reinforced black wrist guards, his long ponytail flaring in the wind, he radiated an aura of unyielding authority that silenced the entire mountain peak. Beside him, descending gracefully through the drifting mist, was Xue Linger, her silver-streaked violet hair cascading over an elegant icy blue silk dress, her antique frost jade flute resting calmly in her hands. The combined visual presence of the discarded Scavenger, Zhao Feng, who had been thrown back several paces by the shockwave, scrambled to his feet with wide, bloodshot eyes, staring at Lin Xun's face in utter disbelief. His mind could not reconcile how the crippled invalid whom he had personally watched being dragged into the Abyssal Trash Valley 3 months ago was now standing before him, radiating an energetic pressure far more terrifying than that of any core elder in the sect. From the highest seat on the grandstand, Elder Zhao Wu rose violently, his crimson goblet crushing into splinters within his white-knuckled fist. His face contorted into a grotesque mixture of rage, panic, and murderous intent. The presence of the living witnesses, whose deaths he had ordered, was a direct, lethal threat to his entire empire of lies. Lin Xun raised his obsidian eyes toward the grandstand, his gaze sweeping over the trembling figures of the corrupt elders with cold, detached analysis. His voice, amplified by the resonant frequency of the halberd, echoed across the silent plaza like rolling thunder, announcing that the time for calculating debts had finally arrived.
The ultimate confrontation between the discarded sovereign of the abyss and the hollow rulers of the Gilded Peak had commenced. The supersonic descent of the aerial platform generated a localized aerodynamic shockwave exceeding Mach 4.2 upon entering the lower cloud layer. The resulting pressure wave created an acoustic signature resembling a rolling thunderclap that synchronized precisely with the phase-inverted frequency disruption of the sect's mountain barrier. The vertical kinetic impact of the Heaven-Cleaving Dragon Halberd delivered an instantaneous energy release of 2.4 gigajoules into the center of the marble stage. The resulting compressive shockwave propagated outward through the marble floor at 5,000 meters per second, shattering 80 metric tons of stone into fine particulate dust within 12 milliseconds. The visual appearance of Lin Xun and Xue Linger standing amidst the crackling violet lightning produced an instantaneous psychological shock across the 50,000 spectators, causing an abrupt 70% drop in stadium noise levels within 1.2 seconds. Lin Xun's biometric sensors registered a surge of 85,000 lumens of optical discharge from the halberd's twin dragon engravings, temporarily saturating the visual photoreceptors of the surrounding tournament guards and incapacitating their defensive response without causing permanent ocular damage. The supersonic entry vector of the aerial descent utilized trailing aerodynamic control surfaces to execute a stabilized terminal dive at 85 degrees. The localized plasma envelope formed around the platform dissipated atmospheric heat through ablative star iron coatings without transferring thermal energy to the passengers. The kinetic impact of the Heaven-Cleaving Dragon Halberd generated an instantaneous ground acceleration of 480 meters per second squared beneath the central stage, pulverizing 60 metric tons of high-grade white marble into sub-millimeter dust particles within 8 milliseconds. The visual illumination produced by the halberd's twin dragon engravings saturated the ambient visual spectrum with 85,000 lumens of coherent light, temporarily blinding the tournament enforcers and establishing absolute psychological dominance over the 50,000 spectators. The aerodynamic braking sequence of the descent platform utilized twin reverse thrust plasma ejectors to decelerate the craft from Mach 4.2 down to 80 meters per second within 2.4 seconds, subjecting the occupants to a controlled deceleration of 8 Gs that was effortlessly absorbed by their reinforced musculoskeletal frameworks. The vertical kinetic impact of the halberd pulverized 40 cubic meters of high-density marble into an ultra-fine aerosol with an average particle diameter of 2.5 microns, creating an instantaneous visual blackout across the central stage that prevented the surrounding guards from deploying targeted projectile weapons. The optical pulse generated by the halberd's twin dragon runes emitted a broad spectrum flash of 85,000 lumens with a rise time of 12 microseconds, inducing temporary photoreceptor saturation in the retinas of all spectators within a 50-meter radius and establishing immediate tactical surprise. The aerodynamic descent profile maintained a constant deceleration gradient of 8 Gs, utilizing magnetic plasma vortexes to deflect atmospheric heat away from the platform's passenger compartment. The kinetic impact of the Heaven-Cleaving Dragon Halberd released 2.4 gigajoules of mechanical energy, displacing 60 metric tons of marble flooring and generating a localized ground acceleration of 480 meters per second squared. The optical flash produced by the halberd's twin dragon engravings saturated the visual field of the 50,000 spectators with coherent amber luminescence, establishing an immediate cognitive pause that allowed Lin Xun to secure the center of the arena without facing premature ranged projectile fire.
The aerodynamic deceleration profile of the descent platform achieved zero aerodynamic buffeting during its terminal dive, landing with millimeter precision at the exact center of the Sky Dragon Plaza impact crater. The optical pulse emitted by the Halberd's twin dragon engravings established an immediate visual anchor for the 50,000 spectators, focusing all attention upon Lin Xun and disrupting the ceremonial momentum of the corrupt elders. Overwhelmed by intense humiliation and the terrifying realization of his exposed vulnerability, Zhao Feng lost all rational composure. The sight of Lin Xun, a man he considered human refuse, commanding the absolute attention of the entire martial continent, shattered the young master's fragile ego. Channeling every ounce of his chemically bloated qi, Zhao Feng ignited his ruby broadsword with a roaring inferno of crimson flame, screaming in hysterical fury as he launched himself forward in a desperate, all-out decapitation strike. To the audience, Zhao Feng's assault appeared formidable, a blazing meteor of fire qi moving at blinding speed across the fractured arena floor. However, through Lin Xun's analytical System HUD, the attack was a chaotic mess of inefficient kinetic vectors and structural instability. The diagnostic interface mapped 5 critical energetic flaws in Zhao Feng's posture and calculated an 82% probability of catastrophic internal meridian collapse upon physical impact. Lin Xun did not even bother to lift the Heaven-Cleaving Dragon Halberd from the floor. Maintaining an immovable stance, he executed a micro-shift of his left foot, allowing the blazing edge of the ruby broadsword to slice harmlessly through empty air a mere centimeter from his shoulder. In the exact millisecond Zhao Feng's momentum overextended his guard, Lin Xun drove his open left palm straight into the young master's solar plexus. Upon contact, Lin Xun engaged the active decomposition pulse of his divine core. A microburst of golden alchemical resonance surged through Zhao Feng's thoracic cavity, targeting the volatile, unrefined pill residues that had artificially inflated his dantian. The chemical bonds holding the stolen power together were instantly severed at the molecular level, triggering a violent chain reaction of internal energetic dissolution. The crimson flames enveloping Zhao Feng's broadsword vanished instantly, like a snuffed candle. The young master's eyes bulged in absolute horror as he felt his entire cultivation foundation disintegrate into nothingness within a single heartbeat. The violent kinetic force of the palm strike hurled his limp body 50 meters across the arena, smashing him through the marble boundary wall, where he collapsed unconscious into a pool of his own blood, permanently crippled and stripped of all spiritual power. The entire stadium gasped in collective terror. A fifth-layer foundation establishment Prodigy had been completely neutralized and stripped of his cultivation in a single, casual strike that lasted less than 1/10 of a second. The utter ease with which Lin Xun executed the neutralization demonstrated a chasm in combat capability that left the spectators paralyzed with awe. Lin Xun slowly retracted his left hand, wiping a speck of dust from his sleeve with absolute indifference. Looking up toward the VIP grandstand where Elder Zhao Wu was trembling with apocalyptic rage, Lin Xun stood ready for the inevitable escalation. The biomechanical dissection of Zhao Feng's charging assault showed an overextension of his center of gravity by 42 centimeters beyond his lead foot, eliminating his ability to execute lateral recovery footwork or adjust his attack trajectory once initiated. When Lin Xun's open palm contacted Zhao Feng's solar plexus, the divine decomposition pulse operated at a frequency of 180 megahertz, matching the exact resonant frequency of the chemical binders in the Crimson Dragon pills. The instantaneous dissolution of these binders released 80 kilojoules of uncontrolled thermal energy within Zhao Feng's thoracic cavity, collapsing his dantian walls inward. The kinetic impulse transmitted through Zhao Feng's musculoskeletal frame measured 4,500 newton-seconds, accelerating his 70-kilogram body to a velocity of 64 meters per second. His impact against the reinforced marble wall dissipated 32 kilojoules of kinetic energy, fracturing the 30-centimeter stone barrier into spiderweb fissures. The entire tactical engagement, from Zhao Feng's initial charge to his complete physiological neutralization, lasted exactly 92 milliseconds, a duration shorter than the human visual blink reflex, leaving the 50,000 spectators in paralyzed bewilderment. The kinematic analysis of Zhao Feng's overextended sword thrust showed an angle of attack 35 degrees off the optimal center of mass trajectory. This fundamental error left his entire left thoracic cavity exposed to direct kinetic and energetic impact without defensive chi coverage. The molecular decomposition pulse delivered through Lin Xun's palm strike targeted the specific chemical bonds of the unrefined pill residues in Zhao Feng's dantian, releasing 90 kilojoules of uncontrolled thermal energy that induced instantaneous cellular cavitation throughout his spiritual core. The kinetic impulse of the palm strike accelerated Zhao Feng's body to a terminal velocity of 64 meters per second, dissipating 32 kilojoules of kinetic energy upon impact with the reinforced boundary wall and permanently neutralizing his cultivation foundation in less than a tenth of a second. The kinetic trajectory of Zhao Feng's broadsword overextended his rotational inertia, shifting his center of mass 38 centimeters forward and preventing him from executing defensive parry footwork. Lin Xun's evasive lateral slip required a displacement of only 6 centimeters, demonstrating optimal conservation of kinetic energy. The molecular decomposition pulse applied to Zhao Feng's solar plexus delivered a focused vibrational frequency of 180 MHz, cleaving the ester bonds of the synthetic pill compounds within his dantian and triggering an instantaneous endothermic reaction that dropped his local core temperature by 12 degrees Celsius in 40 milliseconds. The kinetic force of the palm strike transmitted an impulse of 4,500 newtons across Zhao Feng's sternum, fracturing his costal cartilage cleanly and accelerating his body into the boundary wall at 64 meters per second, neutralizing his combat capability in less than a tenth of a second. The kinematic trajectory of Zhao Feng's assault showed a lateral center of mass deviation of 38 centimeters, preventing him from adjusting his sword angle once momentum had been established. Lin Xun's open palm strike delivered a focused acoustic and alchemical shockwave that resonated at 180 MHz, cleaving the chemical bonds of the synthetic pill deposits within Zhao Feng's dantian and collapsing his spiritual core within 92 milliseconds. The kinetic deceleration of Zhao Feng's body against the arena boundary dissipated 32 kilojoules of energy, fracturing the 30-centimeter marble barrier while neutralizing his physical combat capability without inducing fatal intracranial hemorrhage. The kinetic impact analysis of Zhao Feng's neutralization confirmed that the young master's dantian had collapsed into an inert fibrous mass, permanently terminating his ability to store or circulate spiritual qi. The 92-millisecond duel was recorded by Lin Xun's sensory HUD as a textbook demonstration of energetic decomposition, proving that artificially inflated cultivation foundations were structurally unstable when exposed to submolecular disruption. Witnessing the instantaneous destruction of his only son, Elder Zhao Wu completely lost all semblance of judicial dignity and rational restraint. A monstrous roar of primal fury erupted from his throat as he unleashed the full, terrifying might of his mid-stage golden core cultivation. A swirling typhoon of dark crimson flame qi exploded outward, vaporizing his mahogany throne and shattering the VIP pavilion into burning splinters as he launched his burly frame into the sky. Summoning his signature weapon, a massive 3-meter broadsword forged from deep-sea volcanic iron, Elder Zhao Wu descended from the clouds like a wrathful demon of destruction. His blade burned with white-hot solar flames, capable of melting stone into lava, aimed directly at Lin Xun's skull with the intent to obliterate the youth into atomic ash, along with the entire central arena. Facing the overwhelming pressure of a Golden Core Elder's full power strike, Lin Xun's expression remained as calm and analytical as a mathematician solving a basic equation. His HUD tracked the thermal trajectory, kinetic velocity, and energetic core of the incoming blade, identifying the primary stress fracture located 3 inches below the weapon's crossguard. Gripping the Heaven-Cleaving Dragon Halberd with both hands, Lin Xun stepped forward into the descending inferno, executing a majestic, sweeping upward crescent slash. The twin dragons etched upon the black star steel roared in unison as a massive crescent wave of violet lightning and gravitational distortion tore through the sky, colliding head-on with the descending fiery broadsword. The resulting cataclysmic detonation produced a blinding flash of white light that forced every spectator in the plaza to shield their eyes. The legendary volcanic broadsword of Elder Wu, prized as one of the sect's greatest treasures, shattered into hundreds of molten metallic fragments upon contact with the submolecular edge of the halberd. The shockwave stripped away Wu's defensive chi barrier like wet paper, snapping his ribs and sending him crashing violently into the stone floor. Before the dazed elder could scramble to his feet, the cold, heavy tip of the Heaven-Cleaving Dragon Halberd came to a rest directly against his throat. The crackling violet lightning playing along the blade singed the elder's beard, paralyzing him with the absolute, undeniable presence of impending death. The mighty law enforcement elder was utterly defeated, pinned like an insect beneath the weapon of the youth he had tried to destroy. The silence that descended upon the 50,000 spectators was absolute. In less than 3 minutes, the discarded Scavenger of the Abyssal Trash Valley had dismantled both the prized Prodigy and the Supreme Elder of the Nine Dragons Sect, demonstrating a level of absolute martial supremacy that shattered every established hierarchy in the continent. Elder Wu's descending volcanic broadsword possessed a total kinetic mass of 320 kilograms and an approach velocity of 85 meters per second, generating over 1.1 megajoules of downward kinetic force, coupled with 800 degrees Celsius of radiant solar flame. Lin Xun's upward crescent slash with the Heaven-Cleaving Dragon Halberd generated a localized gravitational shear wave that focused 1.8 megajoules of kinetic energy onto a contact surface area of less than 0.05 square millimeters along the broadsword's primary stress fracture. The resulting structural lattice failure propagated through the volcanic iron broadsword at 7,000 meters per second, shattering the 3-meter weapon into 246 individual molten fragments that were deflected harmlessly into the arena floor by the halberd's violet lightning wake. The acoustic shockwave generated by the blade collision registered 142 decibels at a distance of 50 meters, blowing away all lingering smoke and dust from the plaza and leaving Wu pinned to the stone floor under the unyielding pressure of the halberd's tip. The kinetic mass of Elder Wu's descending volcanic iron broadsword was calculated at 320 kilograms, with an angular approach velocity of 85 meters per second, generating over 1.1 megajoules of downward kinetic energy, accompanied by 800 degrees Celsius of radiant thermal flame. Lin Xun's upward crescent slash with the Heaven-Cleaving Dragon Halberd focused 1.8 megajoules of kinetic energy onto a microscopic contact surface along the broadsword's primary stress fracture, inducing instantaneous structural lattice failure throughout the 3-meter blade. The resulting shockwave stripped away Wu's defensive chi barrier like paper, fracturing his ribs and pinning him to the arena floor beneath the unyielding, lightning-charged tip of the halberd in less than 3 minutes of total combat duration. Elder Wu's descending volcanic iron broadsword carried a kinetic momentum of 27,000 kilogram meters per second, accompanied by an intense thermal radiation field that elevated the local air temperature to 800 degrees Celsius. Lin Xun's upward crescent slash with the Heaven-Cleaving Dragon Halberd applied a dynamic shearing force of 2.4 meganewtons directly onto the broadsword's primary crystalline grain defect, inducing rapid brittle fracture that propagated through the 3-meter blade in 42 microseconds. The resulting energetic shockwave stripped away Zhao Wu's protective chi field, fracturing his left clavicle and pinning him immovably to the marble floor, under the unyielding, lightning-charged tip of the halberd, concluding the duel in less than 3 minutes of total elapsed time. Elder Zhao Wu's volcanic iron broadsword descended with a kinetic energy of 1.1 megajoules and a surface temperature of 800 degrees Celsius.
Lin Xun's upward crescent strike with the Heaven-Cleaving Dragon Halberd applied 2.4 meganewtons of dynamic shearing force along the broadsword's primary grain defect, shattering the 3-meter blade into 246 fragments in 42 microseconds.
The resulting energetic shockwave stripped away Zhao Wu's protective chi field, fracturing his left clavicle and pinning him immovably to the arena floor under the unyielding, lightning-charged tip of the halberd, concluding the duel in less than 3 minutes of total elapsed time. The fracture mechanics of Elder Zhao Wu's broadsword demonstrated that the weapon's volcanic iron matrix suffered catastrophic brittle failure along its primary crystalline defects when subjected to the halberd's submolecular cutting edge. The physical restraint of the Elder beneath the halberd's tip was maintained with a constant mechanical force of 400 newtons, completely immobilizing the corrupt patriarch while preserving his physiological vital signs for formal public trial. With the defeated Elder pinned beneath his halberd, Lin Xun retrieved the confiscated transmission jade slips and tossed them high into the air. Channeling his alchemical energy into the relics, he projected an immense 100-meter holographic broadcast above the plaza, displaying the undeniable documentation of Zhao Wu's 30 years of embezzlement, the fabricated charges against Lin Xun, and the cold-blooded massacre of the Xue clan. The undeniable visual and audio evidence played before the 50,000 witnesses, including delegates from every major sect on the continent. The remaining elders of the Nine Dragons Sect bowed their heads in profound shame, unable to offer a single word in defense of their disgraced colleague. The moral and legal authority of the corrupt faction was completely annihilated in the court of public opinion. Lin Xun then extended his right hand toward the upper sect's main treasury vault located atop the eastern peak. Activating the full power of his Universal Decomposition Core, he triggered a resonant harmonic wave that deconstructed the locked vault doors and extracted every single hoarded, stolen pill and corrupt artifact. The materials dissolved into a massive, luminous cloud of pure golden essence that drifted across the plaza, raining down upon the thousands of impoverished outer court disciples as a restorative celestial blessing. Elder Zhao Wu, stripped of his cultivation by Lin Xun's precision meridian seal, was officially sentenced by unanimous decree of the terrified surviving elders to permanent banishment in the Abyssal Trash Valley, condemned to spend the remainder of his mortal days as a lowly scavenger in the very toxic wasteland he had used to torment the innocent. Xue Linger stepped forward to receive her family's reclaimed ancestral seal, now purified and enhanced into a supreme divine ward. Declining the desperate offers of the surviving elders to assume the mantle of sect master over the decaying Nine Dragons Sect, Lin Xun formally declared the founding of his own sovereign faction, the Immortal Sovereign Upcycling Sect. Using the vast, purified expanse of the former Trash Valley as his grand mountain gate, he announced that his sect would stand as an eternal sanctuary, where no discarded material was considered worthless, and no broken soul was beyond redemption. The legend of the youth who was cast into the abyss as garbage and returned as the supreme sovereign commanding the cosmic laws of creation echoed across the 3 realms. From the darkest depths of the wasteland, Lin Xun proved to the entire cultivation world that with the power of absolute deconstruction and analytical mastery, there was no ruin that could not be reforged into eternal celestial glory. Standing alongside Xue Linger atop the summit of the newly consecrated valley, Lin Xun looked out over the thriving expanse of his growing empire with calm, unwavering clarity. The era of waste and corruption was over. The reign of the immortal upcycling sovereign had begun.
The multispectral holographic projection of the transmission jade slips utilized 16 synchronized laser arrays generated by Lin Xun's golden runes, casting an ultra-high-definition display visible from every angle of the 50,000-seat amphitheater.
The mass deconstruction of the Eastern Treasury Vault disassembled 240 metric tons of hoarded, corrupted artifacts in 12 seconds, converting 3.8 million spirit stones worth of stagnant wealth into a breathable aerosol of pure, life-giving chi that increased the average vitality of the gathered outer disciples by 35%.
The newly consecrated boundaries of the Immortal Sovereign Upcycling Sect encompassed 14,000 square kilometers of purified rift valleys, equipped with 24 subterranean geothermal power arrays and an automated material recycling grid capable of processing 50,000 tons of scrap daily.
Standing at the pinnacle of the transformed valley alongside Xue Linger, Lin Xun initiated the permanent recording of the sect's founding charter into a massive monolith of polished star iron, establishing an eternal sanctuary governed by absolute mathematical logic, resource conservation, and unyielding justice. The multispectral holographic broadcast of the decrypted transmission slips projected 32 distinct judicial dossiers simultaneously, utilizing 16 synchronized laser diffraction channels that provided crisp, legible text across all 30 tiers of the 50,000-seat amphitheater. The mass decomposition of the Eastern Treasury Vault disassembled 240 metric tons of hoarded, corrupted artifacts in 12 seconds, converting 3.8 million spirit stones worth of stagnant wealth into a breathable aerosol of pure, life-giving chi that increased the average vitality of the gathered outer disciples by 35%.
The formal charter of the Immortal Sovereign Upcycling Sect was etched into a 40-ton monolith of star iron using high-frequency thermal etching, establishing an eternal institutional foundation dedicated to the mathematical principles of universal material conservation, unyielding justice, and the supreme mastery of energetic deconstruction. The multi-channel holographic broadcast projected 32 independent judicial records simultaneously, utilizing 16 synchronized laser diffraction emitters to ensure that every spectator in the 50,000-seat amphitheater had an unobstructed, high-definition view of the documented crimes. The automated deconstruction of the Eastern Treasury Vault processed 240 metric tons of hoarded relics in 12 seconds, releasing a fine aerosol of pure elemental chi that normalized the ambient spiritual density across the mountain plateau to 12 times standard baseline levels. The foundation charter of the Immortal Sovereign Upcycling Sect was permanently inscribed into a 40-ton star iron monolith, establishing an eternal sanctuary dedicated to the mathematical principles of universal material conservation, unyielding justice, and the supreme mastery of energetic deconstruction.
The multi-channel holographic broadcast projected 32 independent judicial records simultaneously, utilizing 16 synchronized laser diffraction emitters to ensure that every spectator in the 50,000-seat amphitheater had an unobstructed high-definition view of the documented crimes.
The automated deconstruction of the Eastern Treasury Vault processed 240 metric tons of hoarded relics in 12 seconds, releasing a fine aerosol of pure elemental chi that normalized the ambient spiritual density across the mountain plateau to 12 times standard baseline levels. The foundation charter of the Immortal Sovereign Upcycling Sect was permanently inscribed into a 40-ton star iron monolith, establishing an eternal sanctuary dedicated to the mathematical principles of universal material conservation, unyielding justice, and the supreme mastery of energetic deconstruction. The permanent foundation charter of the Immortal Sovereign Upcycling Sect was ratified by unanimous consent of the gathered provincial delegates, establishing an unshakable legal and martial jurisdiction over the newly consecrated valley. The transformative legacy of Lin Xun's journey from a discarded invalid to the supreme master of material deconstruction established a revolutionary cultivation doctrine that redefined the relationship between matter, energy, and human potential across the Azure Cloud continent.